were wrong. Where's Blackie?
Bert.
You call him...
POLDARK from Masterpiece Theatre is made possible by a grant from Mobil Corporation.
The Soviet Union invaded Pakistan because it is the first step in an effort to gain control of the Middle East and all the oil deposits. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan because it wants to tighten its military and ideological grip on Afghanistan, wants it to be kind of an extension of the Soviet Union and maybe somewhere down the line part of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan because it wants to dominate the world. You don't know why they invaded Afghanistan. All right, boy, have I got a guest for you. Meet Morton Kaplan, PhD. Professor Kaplan is director of the Center for Strategic and Foreign Policy Studies, University of Chicago. Okay, steps forward now, the academic, to offer his own. You've been studying this for a long time. How do you answer the question?
All right, we have to go back a little bit. Look at that map. Now, when you were in school, you read about all the wars in Europe, and that was the world, wasn't it? Take a look at that little bitty Europe in that great big map of Eurasia, which is in fact the real world. We're just a little island off to the side. Now, up through World War II, that little bitty Europe was the world. Most of the economic power, most of the skilled manpower, and the armies went back and forth across Europe. When the war ended, Europe was devastated. The Soviet Union, which had been invaded by Napoleon and Hitler, was trying to conquer Eastern Europe to prevent any future invasion, but they were hated by the people except in Bulgaria and afraid that the U.S. might win out there. Western Europe was devastated economically, politically, large communist parties in France and Italy. And we were afraid it would go communist, and if it did, then again, this whole map, and here we would be just the little beleaguered United States sitting here off to the side of everything. So you had a Cold War, very simply, not because Stalin was a madman or because he intended to conquer the world, but because there was a threat to each of the world powers. What changed? The Soviet Union consolidated its power in Eastern Europe. Western Europe recovered, came firmly into the Western camp. You had détente. Why are things going bad now? The world has changed again. We've let the American military system run down. The Soviet Union now is the biggest military power in the world, both in nuclear and conventional terms. We've got rid of an army that works, and we have an army that doesn't
The United States
work.
does.
The United States has an army that doesn't work. Most of our allies around the world are scared to death of the Soviet Union and have no confidence in the United States. When I was in Japan last year talking to some of the most conservative Japanese, so conservative they were still arguing they were right to go into China. Half of them were against Japanese rearmament. They said it would provoke the Soviet Union and they couldn't count on the United States. Well, can they count on the United States? We tried to pull out of Korea. The people stopped it, but we tried to. We've thrown Taiwan to the side for favor of the People's Republic. We're not true to our friends. We're not strong. The Soviet Union is led by tough-minded people. I don't think they have a plan to conquer the world, but they're very tough. They believe that people will run the world who know they want to run it and will do the things necessary. You know what top Soviet people said to me during the time of Vietnam? Why don't you win? They're impressed by the fact that we don't want to win. They look at what is happening in Iran and the instability of Afghanistan, and they say they hate anarchy. And if we will not help run the world, they'll run what they have to run. Now look at Western Europe. What is there? Yeah. Phil, will you put this up?
Sure.
This is an insert of the state of Pennsylvania. Look at the distance from East Germany to France. Here, maybe I can do it better.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Can you all see this? That's the state of Pennsylvania. That's a very small part of the U.S. Do you see how small this is?
Can we get closer, Ronnie?
There's no space there. It's overnight, the tanks going and rolling through it. Everything depends upon confidence. The confidence that we have the will and the means to say, no, the Soviet Union isn't going to attack. It's not stupid. It's a situation in which there will be political, economic, and military pressure.
Let me see if I got you now. If you're saying the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan for, among other reasons, the perceived weakness of the United States and the fact that it could do so without worrying that this big superpower was going to do anything
I don't
about
want to oversimplify. There are 60 million Muslims in the Soviet Union on the border with Iran and Afghanistan.
Right along here.
You've just had this Khomeini in Iran, who's very religious and, in our terms, not very rational. Very worrying to the Russians. In Afghanistan, you have a revolt against a pro-Soviet government. That could turn the same way. The Soviet Union has an interest in preventing that kind of instability. But when they move in, there's the Persian Gulf down there. The MiGs are now within range of the Strait of Hormuz, which means they can control with air power. There is 2/3 of the oil of the world. Here is all of Eurasia. This is the strategic world with the people, the raw materials, except for South Africa, everything that is required to dominate the world. You don't have to think in terms of a Russian plan. You don't have to think that they have the intentions of doing this. If we cannot maintain our strength and our system of alliances, it will occur step by step, simply because the Russians will look around, they'll see a danger here. All right, we'll solve the problem, and they'll make another move.
All right. What would Professor Kaplan do about this? You don't mind. You do sound rather hawkish. Do you mind that observation?
I don't mind it.
It's true.
But I get along beautifully with Russians and Eastern Europeans. We understand each other.
But I'm not sure what you would have us do.
I'll tell you what I would have us do. First of all, there's nothing we can do in Iran. That's why we were, in a sense, lucky the Russians moved into Afghanistan. Once we let the Shah in, we were stuck. Anything we would do ran the danger of driving Iran into the arms of the Russians. Now, Afghanistan, it's too close to the Soviet Union for us to move troops in. We can ship in anti-tank tows and red eyes against their helicopters, but what could we have done? We had a move we could have made immediately, an air and naval blockade of Cuba. What could we have asked for? Well, the Russians have an atomic submarine base. They deny they have it, but they have it. It's contrary to an agreement. Pull it out. They have combat troops there, contrary to an agreement. Pull it out. The Cubans have troops in Africa, contrary to international law. Pull it out. We don't have to throw Castro out. We just put the price very high and face the Russians with a stiff situation in an area we can control.
Yes, but I don't have to tell you that for us to attempt to blockade Cuba with all of these ultimatums is to, one, risk Russia and Cuba together refusing to acquiesce to these ultimatums, and it also risks further deteriorating already chaotic relations between the United States and the rest of Latin America. You don't really think the rest of Latin America is going to sit there while imperialists capitalistic, greedy, exploitive United States of America blockades brother or sister Cuba, do you?
Yes, I do, if we pull it off.
Is
If we're
isn't
weak internally, then the answer is no.
Isn't this saber-rattling, though? And I mean, there are a couple of things. If I'm in the Kremlin and the United States blocks Cuba,
What will you do about it?
well, there's a couple of things I can do. First of all, I'm not going to be very anxious because Cuba is not that strategically important to me as a member of the Politburo.
No, but it's a bloody nose.
Well, it's a little bit of a public relations problem. So I'll pull out my handful of troops, and I'll even send you photos of what you allege to be a submarine base. The point is, Russia is not that invested, in my view, and in the view of other analysts, politically or emotionally or strategically in Cuba.
Well, I think you're wrong. Because as I read the Russian mind, when they have an alliance, it's very important to maintain the fidelity of the alliance. Secondly, it is in fact pushing the Russians back a step. Now, that is what will give heart to our friends around the world, even those who would argue, oh, it's a bad thing, you've raised the risk of war. That happened during the Korean War. The Europeans said that's the wrong place. But if we hadn't been in Korea, imagine how morale would have collapsed in Western Europe. You see, what are the Russians going to do? We can cut off all movement in and out of Cuba. The most they can do is test us. In fact, they did test us the first year of Carter's administration. It didn't even get into the papers. They sent their atomic submarines around Florida. Then they flew over the MiGs from Cuba, and you know the MiGs do fire control. We were good little boys. We said nothing. We have to rock the boat, because if we don't rock the boat today, the boat is really going to rock in a couple years.
Do you really want to risk nuclear war over the island of Cuba? That's really the question.
There will not be a risk of nuclear war over the island of Cuba, but there may be a risk of nuclear war over Yugoslavia.
Because of Tito's deteriorating condition? And
That's correct. I've been told by Yugoslavs that there are pro-Russian elements in the Yugoslav army. Now, suppose the Soviet Union gets an invitation. One of the leaders of the Italian Communist Party told me privately that Yugoslavia is the essential issue in all of Europe. Now, if the Russians think that we will never do anything, they may be tempted into Yugoslavia. Then you will have World War III, because if Yugoslavia goes, we lose Europe.
Let me try this on you then. And you're a tough out, because you really are ready to go in guns blazing, it sounds to me.
You better believe it.
All right. All right. I don't... All right, let me give you... Let's try this. The Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan because they had a puppet there who really wasn't doing a very good job, and they are understandably paranoid about the unrest and the intense undercurrent that's underway now in the Islamic world. This is, I don't have to...
They have a very real interest.
All right. So they moved in. I think it was the dumbest public relations maneuver they possibly could have made. I think world opinion is against them. You keep talking about how our allies are not going to trust us unless we get tough. I think this move has the chance of falling of its own weight. Beyond that, I think it's going to be interesting to see how long it's going to take them to stabilize Afghanistan. And from what I understand, there's a lot of zeal among the insurgents in Afghanistan to make it very difficult. Afghanistan's not going to knuckle under. It may not be their Vietnam, but it's not going to be easy. And do you really think the world's going to stand still while Russia, somewhere down the line, blocks the Persian Gulf?
They're not going to block the Persian Gulf. Things aren't going to happen that fast or in that order. The Russians are going to consolidate this first. Now, the rebels can be driven up into the mountains, and the Russians don't have to control the mountains. Now, if we have enough courage to send them equipment, we can make it costly. But so far, we haven't done it, and it's not clear the administration is going to do that. Now, what are we going to do when, in 6 months, the Russians reduce their forces to perhaps 5,000 troops, or 10,000, as I think they'll be able to?
In Afghanistan?
Yeah. Now they'll argue they're out, and we'll have to let them hold the Olympics. Then we'll have to sell them wheat, and everyone will see that the Russians carried the day and we collapsed on every card.
You think that's what's going to happen?
Yes, I think that's what's going to happen.
You, I assume, support the Olympic boycott.
You know, my heart is for the kids who practiced for 4 years, especially since I think this is mostly a public relations stunt that won't work.
Okay.
Now that the president has announced it, I think we have no choice.
All right, but you want to send gymnasts to Moscow, and you want to blockade Cuba.
Yeah, I want to hit them where it really hurts.
And your view is that the Olympic boycott is what? A very...
It will hurt, but they'll get the Olympics and we'll be back there. And it's not really anything that will visibly make them pay a price. And that will deter them from moving in the case of Yugoslavia. If they see us with our warship, you know, this argument is now made by a lot of the academic doves about the Cuban Missile Crisis, the John Kennedy risked war. Well, I'm no fan of John Kennedy's. But suppose they had backed down. That was the end of the Berlin blockade. Remember, we had a series of Berlin blockades until Cuba. That was the end of the Berlin blockade. We were being tested there. We've been tested earlier in Carter's administration. Now, I'm not talking about Russian intentions. I'm not a Jackson Rostow type. I refuse to join their group because I think they have this neat little package and I don't share it. I don't think the Russians have a plan for controlling the world. But they've gained a step, and then when you look at the next problem, suppose Tito goes. You know, socialism may not hold in Yugoslavia.
All right. And you think blockading Cuba is going to solve all these problems?
No, but look, the Russians are going to look at that. Oh, isn't this a terrible thing if socialism goes in Yugoslavia? Our friends are calling to us, and we know the Americans aren't going to do anything. What will they do, cut off wheat for another 6 months?
Well, that's going to hurt them. You give me that.
It will not hurt that much. If they are balancing that against the move into Yugoslavia, they will say the United States will back down again. It will not risk war for Yugoslavia. But Yugoslavia is in Central Europe. That may be World War III. I think they have to get their warning first.
Are you saying that the Soviet Union is stronger militarily than the United States?
Absolutely. Look, they are spending more money than we are spending.
Yeah,
they are increasing at a faster rate.
So is their inflation, and so is the chaos in their economy.
So, but it's being taken out of the citizen. Now, look where American spending goes. Mostly payroll and pensions. Do you know what the Russian foot soldier is making per month in Afghanistan? 5 rubles, $7.50. When they put $120 billion, or the equivalent, into their war machine, that's going into war machinery. It's not going into personnel.
It's also going into a non-productive area of the economy that is just going to buy them even further chaos in the future. I don't think that's argued, is it, among economists?
I'm not going to argue that point, but that's going to create the next Russian.
All right. I assume you're against the all-volunteer army, huh?
I'm absolutely against the
You want the draft immediately?
I want the draft immediately.
You think America is prepared for that? Listen to this.
Look,
I mean, is America prepared for...
I did not come...
Emotionally speaking.
I did not come into this world naked. I came into a country that was built by generations of Americans who slaved and struggled to build it. There were several thousand years of civilization behind that. If I cannot make a sacrifice to bequeath something better to my children and my children's children, I don't deserve to be an American.
So we should... You know, it's interesting that you talk about sacrifice, because that's something that worries all of us. How prepared are we to sacrifice?
What went wrong during Vietnam? Now, apart from the stupid way we fought it, we sent boys over there to fight while the rest of the country was at peace. Now, I've been in a war, and it was tough in that war. To fight when the rest of the country is enjoying profits and making no sacrifices, the hardest thing in the world.
Yeah.
So the whole country must sacrifice.
Yeah, well, that's why I wonder about this rather less than precise support that you're giving to the Olympic boycott. We're talking about patriotism and we wave the flags, and yet when it comes to really biting the bullet, pardon the metaphor, We are even hesitant. We're not sure whether we want to boycott the Olympics because all these athletes have worked so hard.
Because it's
Where's that sense of
because
sacrifice?
it's part of a public relations package. If this were put together in a real program of sacrifice, it would be different. We would then insist upon a counter-Olympics in Greece, and we would get our allies along with us, and then our people could participate in that counter-Olympics. We're not going to carry our allies. We'll simply get the Olympics postponed. I think Carter's been finessed by the American Olympic Committee.
Mm-hmm. This is Morton Kaplan. What do you think? He's director of the Center for Strategic and Foreign Policy Studies at the University of Chicago. Sounds like an egghead group to me.
It is.
I mean, yeah. But we care about how he feels as well as your thoughts on this. It's your world, it's our future. And you ask a good question. Into what kind of world are we introducing our children? We hope you'll join us.
Very few tell you what they'll do as president.
My objective is to break up the HEW, to break up the super agencies. I'd like to see us make a national commitment that 10% of the money spent by the federal government on education will be moved out of administration and into the classroom. I think education has always gotten the short end of the stick in HEW.
Baker, ready for the 80s, ready for the job.
At Star. Two thoughts on the subject that I wanted to say. And first of all, you said that in 6 months they will have kind of withdrawn from Afghanistan. The Olympics will go on. Well, our president said if they weren't out in a month, we weren't going. Now, I wasn't sure that that's what I wanted to do, but I think as Americans, he said that, and that we've got to stick to what we say, or nobody will ever believe it.
I don't think there's any question that we're out of the Olympics. That's not even... Will you give us that, Professor Kaplan?
Look, we're going to find most of our allies don't want to go along, so they'll make a compromise. And then when the troops are down, they'll say there's no longer any point, so we made them postpone it. They'll hold it a year late and go ahead. And then what will we argue, that they didn't do it by a certain date?
Well, I think it's important that we stick to what we've said. I think if our athletes can go again in a year someplace else, that's good. I also think that it'd be a mistake for a Cuban blockade. I don't think we should try and bring the war into our own backyard unless it's absolutely necessary.
Well, you know, I would regard it as keeping war out of our backyard. For the first time, I think we're facing a modest risk of World War III, not over Afghanistan, but the hawks are coming in, the Soviet Union. If they misjudge us, if they think we're weaker than we are, then we could really be on the road to World War III.
Isn't history filled with incidents of men who went to war not because of what other people did, but because of what we thought other people did? And you seem to be hooking right into that. Boy, we better show them we're tough, man. We're going to push us around. And you know, when I was a kid, that's how I got into all my fights. I got into fights by trying to prove how tough I was, or to prove that I wasn't scared. And you know, all it did was get me a lot of fights, a lot of bloody nose, and when the fights were over, I knew that I was scared. It didn't do me any good.
Yeah, Phil, there's a lot to be said for that, but you have to bring the Russians into it. They are continually testing us, the way Khrushchev tested Kennedy at Vienna, the way the Russians tested Carter the first year he was in with the submarines. This is the way the Russians are, and this is how they draw conclusions, and you can't get out of that. They are stating the terms of the game.
Well, let me just get you now. I know this is simplifying. You think it's time that America not only talk tough, but somehow act tough?
I think unless we do, we're going to be in a situation where the risks are far graver than they are now.
Yeah, but if we act tough, what are the chances right now of an all-out war? I think people with little children now are worried about that. They don't want to go to war because they're afraid of what will happen with their children.
So what do we do?
Well, I don't know what we do, but I don't want my little boys to go to war.
Well, let me be perfectly honest. I'm afraid of war. I was afraid of it while I was in it during the Second World War. I'm no bloody hero. I think this is the best way of avoiding it.
I think I would be willing myself, even though I'm pregnant, I would be willing to stand up for my country and go to war. If it's, you know, if I have to depend on people like me and my husband and my brother's in England right now, I'm afraid that he might have to go.
Yeah. And so
But I'm Mexican, but I'm willing to go for my country. Because I think it takes people. Nobody can do it. The president can't do it alone.
So should we go to war because Russia invaded Afghanistan?
I think we should make plans and be ready in case something does happen.
Are you optimistic about the release of the American hostages in Iran because of the new Iranian government leader?
I'm kind of hopeful, but then I'm an optimist at heart. I don't really know how to judge that issue.
You talk about what we should do, but isn't there some way we can force our supposed allies to help us? So far, they've been very wishy-washy. And you're talking about World War III over Yugoslavia. Well, that's where they're going to have to worry. But what can we do now to get them to help us, to back us up?
Well, it's, as I say, it's a question of confidence. If they have confidence in us, then I think, in fact, because we have a stronger society than the Soviet Union, that we're pretty safe, and the Soviet Union won't push us that hard. I don't think the men in the Kremlin are madmen, and I don't think they have a plan for world conquest. I think we can come to terms with them. But I don't think the way we're handling it will bring us to terms, and I think that's the problem.
The United States and Russia both are big, powerful countries, and I don't see how, knowing all these nuclear weapons that we have, that there could possibly be a third world war. The whole world would be annihilated. I mean, it just seems like they've got to do something over the tables and not on the war front.
You think they will?
Well, I sure hope so.
In other words, the enormity of the destructive potential of both countries, in your view, makes you relax a little bit. You don't think anybody would be crazy enough to unleash all this?
Well, it doesn't make me relax, but it just seems like, what's the point of trying to be a conquering hero over nothing? I mean, Russia would have nothing to be a power over if it came to nuclear war, whether it's the chemical warfare that would kill us, or the fallout from all the bombs, etc. That it just seems like there'd be nothing left.
Well, the Russians have a position on all this, and there's really a large literature in Russian on it. Their position is that a nuclear war can be won. But they also believe that they can avoid a war, and part of the way they view the world is that if you let them get more powerful, not that you should let them take the entire world, but that you should concede them a number of things, and that is what is happening in Afghanistan now. They have a very practical approach. If, you know, I told you about what they said to me about Vietnam. Why don't you win if you're there? Well, their position is, if you don't want to build up your force, if you don't want to play your role in maintaining world order, let us do it.
But, you know, the whole question about why didn't you win in Vietnam has the sound of the bully boys on the street corner. Why don't you fight? It's this sort of egging on. That's why everybody, when I was a kid, fought, because some other guy was egging him. What's the matter? You afraid? You can't win? What's the matter? Nah, nah, you're a sissy. And it seems to me that you're engaging in this kind of over-the-fence dialogue in a global way.
What are you going to do when you live in a world with a very powerful country that thinks that way? Look, first look at the kind of system they have. Look, our politicians aren't beauties to begin with, are they? They're not, many of them are not very nice people. Think of the kind of guy who succeeds in the Soviet Union, how he got where he is. The kind of
Ruthless, step on people. Send Sakharov off to nowhere, Russia.
That's right. And then get into the people who rise not at the top of the system, but in the sort of second echelons of the system, the kind of compromises they make, and get into their view of the world. Now, these are the people we have to come to terms with, and their interpretations of us are going to play a role. If they miscalculate us, we're in terrible trouble.
And we'll be back in just a moment. Agree with this, but isn't this a killer? Look at this. This is to scale. That's the state of Pennsylvania. Can you beat it? Just think of the... can we see that? I don't know, it'd be interesting to know. What do we got? We got about 30 Pennsylvanias, coast to coast here. Let's just muddy the water here just a little bit. The United States obviously is interested in militarily beefing up Pakistan to give it some muscle in what might be further encroachment should the military incursion in Afghanistan be a successful one. Huh?
Yeah, but the Soviet Union has a lot of clever people in their advisory group. And you know, Pakistan, first, has a very bad government. Second, there's a lot of trouble with the Baluchis, who feed into Afghanistan, Pakistan, and partly into Iran. And the Soviet Union isn't going to invade Pakistan, which would give it enormous problems with India. What it's going to do is start destabilizing the Baluchi area.
All right, one other thing that has to be said here. While the Soviets are invading Afghanistan, and Iran is saying, what's the idea, Russians, invading an Islamic, or undermining the Islamic nation as you are with this military intervention in this country. While all this is happening, and we have hostages in Tehran, and President Carter is holding out the very real possibility of our helping Iran against Soviet aggression, while all this is happening, Secretary of Defense Brown is in China on military tours with the Chinese, and also discussing our potential military aid to China. Wow, this really gets complicated.
It gets complicated, but the Chinese...
and ominous.
It's not ominous. What you have to worry about, and I wouldn't play the China card the way we're playing it, because the Russians happen to be paranoid over China. It goes down deep.
For good reason. Look at this border.
No, the reasons aren't good, because China's armies are not effective outside of China's borders. It's something that goes far deeper. You'll even hear in Moscow the term the yellow peril.
The yellow peril?
It's something in their gut. They're scared.
600 million people are scared?
260 million Russians are scared of 1 billion Chinese.
Okay, let me just get this in. Is it true that the Soviet Union is the largest producer of oil in the world?
Yes.
Now, when you say producer, they don't have the most deposits. Does the Soviet Union have more oil than Saudi Arabia?
I'm pretty sure, but
all right, well, okay, we won't argue that. Why are they, if they're the largest producer of oil in the world, why are they going to have to import so much oil in the 80s? They say 4.5 million barrels a day. I don't understand. I mean...
Well, the Soviet Union is expanding industrial. Its Eastern European partners have enormous use for oil.
You don't think this has anything to do with the Persian Gulf and the oil-rich neighborhood here?
Oh, it obviously has something to do with it. I don't think it was the primary immediate motivation. I think the primary immediate motivation was the shaking of the regime and the danger to their own Muslim border regions. But I'm sure that they were aware of this as a sort of bonus.
Is the UN useless? Is it not doing us any good right now? What kind of an organization is it? We hope to depend on it somehow.
Well, it was a mistake to depend upon the UN for these purposes. Look, when the UN was set up, it was designed to avoid the weaknesses of the League, and it was never designed to solve disputes between major powers. Now, for propaganda purposes, we used it as if we were, and now it's got out of hand for our purposes. It's a forum that enables countries to get together to discuss things they may have in common. It is useless for solving these problems, and always was.
If you join us late, this is Morton Kaplan, University of Chicago, who, among other things, suggested that we have to be just a little bit more specific in our response to this Afghanistan invasion, and you have specifically suggested that we ought to blockade Cuba.
Well, it's too late now. That's the sort of thing
you don't think we can do that now?
There's timing, you see. You cannot wait 4 weeks and then do something. You have to do it when the urgency when the world is shocked by their move. If you've waited this long, you've lost the rationale, because the immediate justification, it's like throwing Castro out. It's the sort of thing we could have done at the Bay of Pigs, but you can't do it 2 or 3 years later.
But millions and millions of people in Latin America want to know who you think you are deciding who should be in or out in any Latin American country or any other country in the world. Isn't this the very kind of arrogant attitude that got us on the unpopular column of world opinion in the first place?
Britain was unpopular during the 19th century, but as long as Britain was powerful and respected, it didn't matter. Moreover, I'm not suggesting that we send in troops to throw Castro out. What I'm essentially suggesting is that we throw the Russians out of Cuba and bring the Cubans back from Africa. Now, we will have demonstrating crowds in Latin America. It's the sort of thing we have to be able to take and not worry about.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
But the Mexicans refuse to take back the Shah. Japan continues to buy Iranian oil, and the French won't boycott the Olympics. We get no support because we have no respect. It's got to change. We've got to protect and enforce American interests in the world. And as your president, we're going to get that job done.
Phil Crane says what everybody thinks. That's why we need Phil Crane for president.
Medical evidence that marijuana smoking may be more harmful than originally believed, that the drug is measurably detrimental to mind and body. And yet the number of people using marijuana, especially young people, has doubled in the last 5 years. Marijuana, how safe is it? Tuesday on Checkpoint, on News Center 5 at 6.
I couldn't give you an oil.
Yeah, just, you insult a lot of people's intelligence with this, but let's just call your attention one more time. Do we have to say how important this Persian Gulf is to world oil supplies? And look how vulnerable that's just waiting to be blockaded. You know, if some egomaniac somewhere decides he's got the hardware, think of the cataclysmic consequences of an attempt to control this area of shipping. I mean, everybody's home heating oil comes out of that. Wow, only hurts when I laugh. Yes?
First of all, I'd like to thank Dr. Kaplan for the comment you made earlier about being fortunate enough to be born in this country. I appreciate that. I think that's a great way to feel. Okay, you said that, first of all, I don't think it's important whether we're really popular with the rest of the world. If we're strong militarily, they'll respect us. And 26% of the Russians farm.
Excuse me, but you know, that's that kind of, you know, it's like the big tough cop. I don't have to be polite to nobody because I'm so tough and I gotta.
Do we need the rest of the world?
Yeah, I mean,
I know that's
aren't we a global community?
That's a very, very popular belief, and that's the way it's been. But could we practically?
Or we've got we've got billion-dollar aircraft carriers. We've got swing-wing bombers. We've got all kinds of military hardware. We've got holes in the ground. We've got Polaris submarines. And a group of 19-year-olds has brought us to our knees. What did the $100+ billion defense budget do for us in Iran?
I'm not certain. I don't know.
Okay, but you want even more investment in military. You want to be even stronger militarily.
Whatever we did at that point, obviously, it was wrong. We need the draft. We need to be strong militarily. That isn't easy to say. I have sons that would certainly go. But how else can we approach this? The Russians are strong militarily. They let you know about it. The world is afraid of them. And we're afraid of them too, and rightfully so, because now we've lost so much of our strength, and we have to build that up. I agree with that. But is it not possible for us to get along without the rest of the whole world? 26% of the Russians farm, and farming in Russia is one step up from being in prison. 3% of America farms, and we feed the rest of the world. That's got to tell us something.
All right, let me just first butt in with a response to what Phil said. It's perfectly true that no military response in Iran would have been useful. But I think what Iran called to the attention of Americans is that if it had been a situation where a military response was useful, unlike 15 or 20 years ago, we were not in a position to make it, and that was a bad position to be in. Do we need the rest of the world? It depends what you mean when you say that. We can get back behind our frontiers with a slightly reduced standard of living. Cut off from the rest of the world, which would then be dominated by the Russians, we would be alone, we would be suspicious, we would be a different kind of country. In effect, it would be saying we don't care about the rest of the world, but we all came from that other part of the world. These are our people, whether in Asia or Europe or wherever they came from. If we didn't care about them, if we didn't care what kinds of institutions they had, if we turned in on ourselves, think of what we would do to ourselves. And I think it's important to avoid that.
Yes. Well, I'm very glad you just said that about caring about the rest of the world, because I'm getting very frightened by the hawkish, as you mentioned, comments today. You said Russia knows how to win a nuclear war, and all this military hardware that you're talking about, it's nuclear. It's mostly nuclear. Are you saying, is anybody here saying that there's any kind of justification for America starting a nuclear war, for America dropping a nuclear bomb anywhere in the world? I mean, I can't accept that thinking.
She's asked a question. Anybody want to pick up on it? Does it concern you? I mean, of course it does. I guess, huh? Yeah.
It concerns me, but my husband fought in Vietnam, where the American people here in America said, oh, well, let them go fight. And there he is over there. Now, is this going to happen again if we get into a war in Pakistan or Iran or whoever it is? Is this going to happen again? We've got to stay together no matter what we do.
Our former experience in a Cold War was really at a quite different time when we didn't know shortages in precious metals. We didn't know shortages in gasoline. I don't really know. We're learning the hard way in Chicago what happens when you overextend what you try to do with an institution, the school board is the result of that. Our schools are collapsing in on us. How can the Soviet Union go on doing this without...
That's a good question. Honestly...
Let's get back to the issue of schools, because it's important. You look what is happening in the Soviet school today. The Soviet school kid will have 4 years of physics. Can you believe that? 4 years of physics. He will have calculus, as well as advanced geometry. You will not believe, if you look at the schooling that they've introduced in the last 10 or 15 years.
Is that going to make him a better world leader? Is that going to be good? Is that, you're endorsing that? You think that's good?
If you want to build a modern economy based upon an information system, these are skills that are necessary. You look at the kids. You look at the kids coming out of our schools, the kids coming into our colleges. Yeah. They can't read or write.
Right. Nobody is giving a clarion call for the wonderful American school system, but Russia has got to. They've got a lap full of problems. Isn't it possible that this is going to collapse of its own weight? I'll give you a chance in just a moment. 8 South University Avenue, Chicago, Illinois, 60637. A couple of corrections here. I inadvertently said Pakistan instead of Afghanistan earlier in the program. And Russia is alleged to, China, researchers say China has about 1 billion people, not 600 million. The Soviet Union claims 260 million.
About that, yes.
I was wondering, if there is a war, do you feel women should be drafted?
I think that women should certainly be drafted, but I have certain doubts as to whether they should be in combat, among other things. I don't want to argue whether in principle it's good or bad, but we live in a world in which men think that they need to protect women, and that might be a bad situation in combat.
What about the final outcome of the American hostages? What in your opinion, will take place?
Oh, I think eventually, if we're cool and play it right, they'll be released. At least I hope so.
Yeah. Who do you think China would side with in case of war, us or Russia?
Well, I think China will be sensible, and if it can avoid it, will side with neither.
Well, that certainly doesn't look that way. There's certainly, you know, we've got...
Because they're trying to get us to be strong in Europe to keep the Russians occupied.
You haven't mentioned the fact that the Islam countries had a meeting and they all have agreed with us that Russia should pull out of Afghanistan.
That's fine, but Russia isn't going to pull out of Afghanistan. And how will they react to the fact that we can do nothing about it?
Don't you feel that if we had a draft right now, we'd have a terrible problem with evasion?
We had a problem with evasion in World War II, and I would agree, if you want to push me, that we've got to prepare the public for it. We simply can't just do it.
Okay, America has beefed up their forces, or the Navy in the Persian Gulf. Does Russia have any ships there? And if Russia doesn't have them, couldn't we get in there and blockade that Persian Gulf?
Russia has more ships in the Indian Ocean than we have. And if you remember, 10 years ago, the Senate tried to get us not even to put that small base at Diego Garcia. Now we understand we have to beef it up and get more. The Navy has a terrible problem I can't get into because we have to control the seas, whereas all Russia has to do is interfere with our control.
Do you really think that women should actually be drafted? I mean, if I was drafted, I think I would panic. You know, what could I do? I couldn't pick up a machine gun or a rifle. I would probably knock myself down.
Well, you know, we're at one of these places where women are fighting with themselves over this, and I would let those women enter the draft who want to enter it.
They haven't even passed a equal rights amendment for women. How could they be drafted?
My husband is in the reserves, and I being, you know, a mother of 4 children, 2 of them are sons, I'm a little concerned about my husband having to go over there and leaving us now when he's been supporting us all this time, because he is doing this part-time just to help out.
But others would say, what if everybody had that attitude when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor? This doesn't make you wrong or just suggest that you shouldn't have this...
I don't mean that he shouldn't go, but I mean, I think some of these boys should get out there and start signing up a little bit more, too. They're concerned about that.
Not the girls, though.
Well, the girls got their parts, too, I think.
We'll be back in just a moment.
If you want to... Like how close Russia monitors our TV system, but is it a good idea for the big guys like you to get on and say, we can't make it, we can't cut it?
Should we just all shut up and...
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think they know everything we're doing, and everybody keeps saying we can't do it, we can't go to war, we don't have the arms, we don't have the people.
Yeah, don't let them know.
Okay. Yeah, the point is, look, the Russians can count, and in addition to counting, they test us. I mentioned some of the tests, and that's what they base their policy on, not what I say. They know these things very well.
I'm sorry that we're out of time.
Yeah.
You certainly have turned the wheels here.
In fact, I quite often have Russians coming through to test things out
for joining us
on me. They're very good at this. You'd be surprised how good they are.
Services provided and promotional fees paid by the following. Introducing the new options for the 80s, including the first keyless entry system and a dazzling electronic dash, Thunderbird.
True Value hardware stores where quality, selection, and service are why they're #1. True Value is more than just a name, it's their way of doing business.
Political candidates are using television more than ever to advertise their candidacy. But are we really voting for the best candidate or the best commercial? Political advertising. We'll talk about it and look at some of those commercials on our next show.
Championship, but somebody on the panel gave away the answer. We invited Doug back to start a brand new match. So you've got yourself $1,200, and you...
I would say that isn't the doctor's fault. He can't predict your later life. Do you have any special things in your body to hold parts of you up? No.
Now another crucial hour in our history. The big question...
General, if war comes, is this country really ready?
It is not. The administration has spent many billions of dollars for national defense. Yet today, we haven't enough tanks for the fighting in Korea. It is time for a change.
The nation, haunted by the stalemate in Korea, looks to Eisenhower. Eisenhower knows how to deal with the Russians. He has met Europe's leaders, has got them working with us. Elect the number one man for the number one job of our time. November 4th, vote for peace. Vote for Eisenhower. A paid film.
Boy, isn't that something? It's like watching something 100 years old. What's fascinating about that, Julian Cantor, who is director of the Political Commercial Archives, you're also a commodities broker here in the Chicago area, but your hobby is to collect this.
That's right, Phil.
Don't you have the largest warehouse of political commercials?
I do, over 8,000 different television political commercials.
You know, you've got some really crazy commercials. Well, we'll talk about those in just a second. You know what's fascinating about that 1952 spot is Republicans in this year's race are saying the same thing about our defense posture today.
Well, many of the issues stay with us, but the form of presentation changes. That spot's very inappropriate for contemporary television because television is a very intimate one-to-one medium. That's more for a newsreel theater.
Ken, you know the guy that said, General, are we ready for war? Looked like a guy who's having a hard time getting a job as an announcer. He looked like an after card-carrying Union guy, which he may have been.
He might have been. I have no way of knowing.
Now, that would be illegal, wouldn't it, in this year? Or how much control do we have?
It's not illegal if it carries the slogan of dramatization.
So that when the candidate in his shirt sleeves is standing in the factory parking lot talking...
Those should be factory workers he's talking to.
Could they be extras? Could they be... they can't be. That would be deceptive.
They can't. Not unless they identify it as a dramatization.
Okay. Can we show the Belusi film? A chap by the name of Belusi ran for governor. Georgia?
Georgia.
Okay. Watch this. Just want to show you this.
This is Nick Beluso. In the next 10 seconds, you will be hit with a tremendous hypnotic force. You may wish to turn away. Without further ado, let me introduce to you the hypnogenesis of mass hypnosis, the Reverend James G. Masters. Take us away, James.
Do not be afraid. I am placing the name Nick Beluso in your subconscious mind. You will remember this. You will vote on election day. You will vote Nick Beluso for governor. You will remember this. You will vote on election day. You will vote Nick Beluso for governor. You will remember this. You will vote on election day. You will vote Nick Beluso for governor. You will remember this. You will vote on election day. You will vote Nick Beluso for governor. You will remember this. You will remember this.
Can you believe that? That's no kidding, that's an actual spot, right? Is that right,
Correct.
Julian?
It's a genuine spot for an otherwise unqualified candidate.
We should say that the guy didn't even pronounce his name right. There's Beluso. It was three syllables. The guy was not elected governor.
No, he
That's
lost
encouraging.
badly.
All right, let me give you an example now of attack commercials. That is the nasties. One of the, you'll recall, you remember the daisy, the child pulling the petals of a daisy and the atom bomb goes off? It was a Lyndon Johnson spot which was intended to smear Goldwater as a warmonger who would drop the bomb in a knee-jerk way. And that wasn't enough. Incidentally, LBJ removed himself from responsibility for this spot, and I don't think he really knew it was happening. But here's the other one. This is LBJ for president, and this is an example of how it gets real nasty in the TV trenches.
Do you know what people used to do? They used to explode atomic bombs in the air. Now, children should have lots of vitamin A and calcium, but they shouldn't have any strontium-90 or cesium-137. These things come from atomic bombs, and they're radioactive. They can make you die. Do you know what people finally did? They got together and signed a nuclear test ban treaty, and then the radioactive poison started to go away. But now, there's a man who wants to be president of the United States, and he doesn't like this treaty. He fought against it. He even voted against it. He wants to go on testing more bombs. His name is Barry Goldwater, and if he's elected, they might start testing all over again.
Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd. The stakes are too high for you to stay home.
You think it's dirty? You don't like that spot, huh? Okay, but what's dirty, and who decides? We're going to have a commission, and who elects the commission? You know? All right. Meet Douglas L. Bailey. Mr. Bailey is political planning consultant, president of Bailey, Deardorff and Associates. You are the package person. I mean, you help people. You are retained by candidates who are running.
That's my job.
All right. You understand that, first of all, this is not an inquisition, but your profession is not held in that high regard, is it, by the public?
I think it's held in very low regard, and to some degree for good reason. I mean, that kind of commercial that you just saw, frankly, I think is overly dramatic. It was unfair to Barry Goldwater. You say, and I hope you're right, that President Johnson didn't know anything about it. I think sometimes it's true that advertising people have control over a campaign, even to the point that the candidates don't know what's running in their campaigns. I think that's wrong. On the other hand, everybody with my job, which is to help elect the candidates that we're working for, has at some point got to answer this tough question. If there are things about your opponent that you know, and if the public knew, would cause them not to vote for that opponent, do you have the responsibility? Is it appropriate to tell them?
Well, but in what manner should you tell them? I mean, it was generally accepted that Barry Goldwater was a conservative candidate in 1964, and that he was, I think we can say, without offending him, a man who perhaps would be more militarily assertive as president. But does it follow that he would be the man who would put strontium-90 in the little girl's ice cream cone?
No, I think it's probably far more effective, although heaven knows President Johnson won big in that election.
Yes, he did.
But far more effective to treat that issue straightforwardly and just lay out Senator Goldwater's words or have the president on there discussing his side of the issue.
We have your agreement that that's a dirty spot, don't we?
I think not only is it dirty from the standpoint of people in my profession, I would conclude that that would be a counterproductive effort in the behalf of the
And a
candidate.
backlash would help the other guy. Look at this one. Here's another one. Texans for Goldwater. This is as nasty as it gets. Texans for Goldwater, 1964.
Let's take a close look at the personal fortune of Lyndon Johnson. He's been a government employee for 33 years. His salary, paid by the American taxpayers, has averaged $14,000 a year. Yet Life magazine conservatively estimates his personal wealth today at $14 million. Where did he get it all? Does Bobby Baker know? How about Billy Saul Estes? Does he have the answer? Surely Walter Jenkins, Lyndon Johnson's closest friend, should be able to tell us. Honestly, it just doesn't add up. We must restore the White House and the office of the presidency as a symbol of respect. We must elect a president we can trust, a man of integrity and honesty. Vote for Barry Goldwater. In your heart, you know he's right.
Now, those who supported Goldwater would say, why not? President Johnson's finances are an appropriate subject of review.
I think that, frankly, violates two of the rules of good political advertising. I think you can have attack and confrontation advertising, but two of the rules of good political advertising are that you don't raise questions that aren't legitimate, for which you don't have answers. And that's one thing that was done. And secondly, it implied some things about people and relationships which are wholly inappropriate. I think it is terribly important for people in our business to understand, in terms of effective advertising, that television is a living room communications vehicle.
Yeah.
And the subject matter and the approach and the emotions that are appropriate in the living room are appropriate on the screen. But if they're not appropriate in the living room, they're not appropriate at all.
Right. Let me just show you one more spot here. This is for J.B. Stoner, who ran for governor of Georgia on states' rights. Is that right?
White supremacy.
White supremacy ticket. This was argued and debated, and many civil rights groups challenged whether or not this ought to air. And the FCC said yes. It came under the terms of the First Amendment. This is something, all right? J.B. Stoner running for governor of Georgia. Can you imagine sitting around the living room with Grandma in front of the fireplace?
This is J.B. Stoner.
Defeat Governor Busby. Busby's state civil rights laws discriminate against white people. Defeat Busby, or he will pass more laws that take from the whites and give to the niggers. Stop discrimination against whites. Love the whites. Repeal Busby's civil rights laws. Restore white rights. Elect white racist J.B. Stoner governor on August 8th.
Preceding announcement paid for by the candidate.
That was, you got to wonder, if that gets by, what's next?
Well, there are two issues involved, Phil. In the first place, as far as his qualification for governor was concerned, he lost badly, which he deserved to. But secondly, as an American citizen, he has first freedom rights, and he exercised those rights in these commercials, and I think that the matter was handled properly by the FCC. The commercial aired, and he got defeated in the polls, which he should have been.
Yeah.
Let me say, Phil, I have a very strong belief that you ought to allow candidates to do anything they want to do, because you ought to have the faith in the public to make a good judgment about those candidates.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, to, without necessarily keying in on it, there's so many promises made during a campaign. I think that everybody who runs for office can look back and perhaps wince a little at the spots that they ran to get there, that the promises made were not fulfilled, or events took over and didn't allow the candidate to...
So listen, sometimes it works the other way. Sometimes, and we've worked with clients who made promises in their television commercials,
yeah,
and then once they got in office, we'd go back, or their staff would go back and show them those commercials every once in a while and reinforce that promise, because that's the promise they're going to be held to, and so they get the job done.
All right, in point, I'd like to show you this commercial, which was used in the campaign to elect the mayor of Chicago. This commercial is less than a year old. All right? Here's an example, then, of what might be useful for all candidates to do. Sit around and look at their old commercials.
Stop the snow. But good planning can prevent the collapse of public transportation and clean this city up fast. I'm Jane Byrne, Commissioner of Consumer Sales under the late Mayor Daley. He taught me about planning, he taught me about government, and he taught me about people. Everywhere I go, I hear about new problems. Nothing seems to be working the way it used to. I think it's time to get this city moving again. I think it's time to get Chicago working again for you.
Vote for Jane Byrne in the Democratic primary.
I think any politician that takes a cheap shot at another politician shouldn't be running, and I think the people know.
Who decides what's cheap?
I think a politician should have enough brains to know what is going on in his campaign. If he's out for smear, then he shouldn't even be running. And I think people have enough brains to know, and they should decide what is good and what is bad. If you're going to ruin another politician's reputation, then it shouldn't be said.
Well, I think you said it all, though. The people are bright enough to know if it's good or bad.
When I'm deciding my vote, I want to hear their outlooks on views, abortion, federal taxes. I don't want to hear about how they couldn't get rid of the snow in Chicago, and I don't want to hear stuff like that. There's one commercial in particular that's on TV today that I think is terrible.
Well, hang on a minute, because I'm afraid it might knock a candidate. I don't want...
No, I won't say it.
No, I want to...
No, it's against the president. And I think his attitude towards the president is very wrong.
It's somebody running against the president? Yes. All right, well, why don't you tell us what the heck? This is America.
Bush's ad...
George Bush's ad.
On against the president. He says if he gets into office, he wouldn't have to be trained.
Well, yes, right. President, we don't have to train. That's true. That's the line.
Me, that's like really knocking down the president quite a few marks. I don't care if you don't like the man, fine, but you don't have to do that kind of attitude against him.
Okay, can we? Your view is shared by lots of folks, and please don't leave me. I need you for the rest of the show. Thanks for... Just one more, okay? Can we do one more? 1968, Ronnie? 1968, this is for the general election, and Nixon is running against Hubert Humphrey, and this is a spot for Richard Nixon. Think of that. Huh? Yes.
Phil, I'd just like to say that I really think that every politician should have his time to have a spot on TV, that I do think that it is beneficial to the people. But I also think that there is a place for a cheap shot, and it probably is a place where they'd have an open rebuttal.
In other words,
You know,
yeah.
two candidates meeting at the same time. Enable, you know, so they can enable themselves to defend themselves at least. But at least the people know both sides.
Right. But then consider the responsibility you're placing in the hands of the broadcaster. You know, a broadcaster then is obliged to allow a candidate to respond to all attacks of all commercials for all the time. It really gets complicated.
But it's been done.
Yeah. You know what I'd like to see is I'd like to see them when we finally get our Republican and Democratic presidential candidates. Why don't we just put them in a room alone and let them talk to each other and televise it? Okay, I'll give you a chance here. I'll give you a chance. We're talking about political commercials, the impact on the presidency, American politics, money, hype. How do you feel about this? We hope you'll join us. Who's director of the Political Commercial Archives, has the largest collection of political commercials in the world. Douglas Bailey is here. He's a political planning consultant. He's the man you call, and it's expensive. You give us that, huh? I mean, this is expensive what you do.
A major statewide campaign for governor, senator now is almost always $1 million. The advertising almost always runs to $500,000, $600,000 out of that million.
Yeah, I assume this includes a lot of research, et cetera, and...
Research, polling, a lot of filming, editing.
One question that I would like to know is the money, does that come from like our income tax? We can contribute $1 from the income tax, or is this strictly like from the candidates or from his supporters?
In almost all state campaigns or local campaigns, it is private contributions from you directly to the candidate. In the presidential race, during the primaries, you can give to the candidate, and then the federal government will match a portion of that money to that candidate. And during the general election, after the conventions have picked the nominees, it's all federal money from that fund that is created by you checking off the $1 on your income tax.
I'd like to ask Mr. Bailey, have you ever worked for a man that you didn't believe in?
We never signed a client that we didn't believe in. We got into a couple situations where we soon discovered that the person we thought we were working for was somebody different than what we had signed on for, and we quit.
One other question. Do you ever use subliminal advertising? Like, say, if Ted Kennedy is running, and if you see him running across the bridge at Chappaquiddick, and all of a sudden you see him sitting in the Oval Office on just one clip, do you ever do that?
No, and technically, you know, there's a device that you can use whereby I can put on the screen. It's illegal. We've never done it, never tried to do it, but I understand that a couple people have at least tried to do it, where you put one frame that says the candidate's name into the middle of a spot. It goes so quickly that your eye, you can't consciously see it, but it registers in your mind. I suppose it's possible, but it's sort of like that hypnotism commercial. It really isn't.
Right.
That guy said, "You'll always remember this name," or you won't forget whatever Bogalusa. Well, I don't think anybody ever will forget Bogalusa who saw that spot, but that doesn't mean anybody's going to vote for him. That's just silly advertising.
You are now working for Howard Baker, is that right?
Correct.
You also worked for Jim Rhodes in 74?
74 and again in 78.
All right, the governor of Ohio. Let's see that. Let's see. This is from the 1974 campaign of James Rhodes and you were his media consultant. Here's one of your spots.
That's right.
Somewhere. It is coming, huh? Somewhere.
At the state fair, Governor Gilligan made what he thought was a funny remark. Asked if he was going to a sheep shearing contest, Gilligan replied, "I shear taxpayers, not sheep." In fact, the Gilligan administration has just about skinned the hide off the state's working men and women. Thanks to Gilligan, 7 different state taxes have been increased, and his state income tax takes $500 million a year out of taxpayers' pockets. Let's make Governor Rhodes governor again.
What do you think?
That's an interesting commercial because...
That's not the word Gilligan would use.
I'm sure not.
But is it possible he said that in jest and that you picked up a one-line attempt to be humorous and made it into a politically damaging remark?
I assume he did say it in jest.
Well, but that isn't the implication of your spot. The implication of your spot is that this is a nasty guy who wants to shear the taxpayers.
A governor who had sheared the taxpayers.
That's not the point. The point is that...
Well, but factually it is the point. I'm not saying that's a great spot. What I think is important to realize is that Jim Rhodes is an old-school politician. It's a good example of what you do in the television age when you have a candidate who is not a great television performer. And if you put Jim Rhodes on television, which we didn't do much in the campaign, there wouldn't be a popular response. He's not Kennedy-esque, he's not charismatic. But he just happened to have been a good governor before Gilligan and a good governor since Gilligan.
Yeah. But if those were the rules in 1860, we wouldn't have had Abraham Lincoln.
We'll never know. That may not be true.
Well, Mr. Bailey has indicated that his company never takes a candidate that it doesn't believe in. If that is true, then you must go through some sort of a screening program for applicants, because if your company is successful or has a track record of being successful, then you must be bombarded with candidates who want to run.
There's such a thing in this business as sort of a hot property every 2 years. Naturally, clients or candidates will go to the firm that has had successes in the previous year. We've developed that kind of reputation. What that means for us is that we have an awful lot of people knocking on the door, and it gives us some chance for a little flexibility in picking and choosing. We're interested, we don't put labels on candidates. We're not looking for conservative or liberal. We're looking for people that we can feel comfortable with and that are, first and foremost, not reflex thinkers of any kind.
But how do you go about deciding? Because unless you personally have contact with them, then you have to, what do you do research to delve through their track record, or?
We do a little bit, quite a bit of research. We do a lot of talking with them.
But if I've got the money and my checks don't bounce, I mean, just how principled are you going to be?
We can afford to be pretty principled.
Could you support?
Because the fact of the matter is we can't work for more than 6 or 7 clients at a time. We have probably 35, 40 potential clients knocking on the door so that we can pick and choose a little bit.
You're now working for Howard Baker, and that spot was your product for James Rhodes. Both of them were Republican. I don't think that neither would be offended if I just generally refer to them as conservative politicians in the nicest way. So my question is, would you accept an assignment from Gary Hart of Colorado, or...
We've had very few Democrats knock on the door. We have worked for some Democrats, former mayor of Louisville, and some people in Washington, D.C.
So you can,
principally a Republican
you can work both sides of the political street.
You can, but you become a little suspect.
All right.
And a lot of people won't hire you if you seem to be flip-flopping all over the place.
Ronnie, can we just see one more example of an attack spot? This is another political commercial in the column of attacking the opponent, huh? All right. Roll film. Political commercials, do they help?
In Washington, the U.S. Senate meets to vote on critical legislation. But the junior senator from California is absent. In fact, while California families worked hard to make ends meet this summer, California's absent senator failed to vote 100 times. 100 times in just 9 weeks. Let's give California a full-time senator.
It worked. Senator Hayakawa was elected over Tunney, Senator Tunney.
Correct.
We'll be back in just a moment.
Hi, it's Harriet.
Afraid we will. That's, if you joined us late, an actual political commercial, and this is the year where we're going to see more and more political spots. We're talking about it, trying to analyze it and figure out whether it's good for us.
Okay, I feel my vote is very, very important, and I do not see why my time should be wasted on such petty garbage as one candidate bringing in slop from another guy's yard. Why don't you emphasize your candidate's good, positive qualities?
Because sometimes attacking is more effective.
That's disgusting.
Well,
I'm sorry.
I mean, it may be disgusting, and I agree with you that some of the stuff we've seen, and perhaps some of the stuff that everybody in this business does, is disgusting. And they may wish a few years later that they hadn't done it. But when you're in a campaign, if you've ever worked in a political campaign, and you are behind, what do? Do you sit there and go down to defeat, or do you rock the boat in what you feel?
You give it your best for what you have right here. You don't smear somebody else.
What is a smear a comparison with your opponent, or is a smear an unfair attack on your opponent?
It is an unfair attack. I mean, so far that's all we've seen this morning.
But what Doug is saying is that oftentimes the candidate who chooses to attack his opponent is making points he thinks are legitimate and valid and the things that the voters should keep in consideration when they make up their minds.
Then can it be done in a much more tactful way than bringing in a
It can be done in various ways, but the purpose of the commercial is twofold. The purpose of the commercial from the standpoint of the candidate is to win supporters or cause his opponent to lose supporters. The purpose of the commercial from the standpoint of our elective process is to enable us as voters to have some kind of meaningful information based on which to make up our minds on Election Day. And if some candidate gives us nothing but garbage, that person doesn't deserve our vote on Election Day. If they give us reasons why we shouldn't support his opponent and why we should support him, then I think that person has given us two kinds of reasons to support his or her candidacy.
Are there no controls over these political commercials? The FCC seems to control commercials for everything else. Are there any controls on these political?
The federal law is very clear that a candidate can do anything that that candidate wants to do, with the exception of violating codes on words.
Profanity, and then laws of libel would govern everything
Libel
else.
and slander.
Yeah, but try and get a libel judgment in a political campaign. I mean, it's
Very
almost
difficult,
impossible.
almost impossible.
Let me just show you an example of direct to the voters. Now, if you've got the charisma, or if you're thought of as good looking and so on, then obviously your media guy is going to say, you get on the air and you do it. Can I see number 7, Ronnie? This is an example of a political spot from some years ago, 1960.
We have to prepare for automation. When one machine takes the place of 5 men, what's going to happen to those 5 men? Men with good education, advanced education, are in great demand. Those that have not had the benefit of that education, they're the ones that are hard hit. We have to make it possible for all of our children to be well educated. Nearly 35% of our brightest boys and girls never see the inside of a college classroom. That's a waste of a national resource and a great waste of an individual resource. Education, studies, and careful research on automation to make it fruitful rather than harmful. Vocational retraining, recognizing that this is a land of opportunity, and we have to make sure that that opportunity is shared by all of our fellow citizens. I can assure you that if we're successful in this election, we're going to go to work. We're going to start this country moving again.
For leadership in the 60s, vote for John F. Kennedy for president.
All right, that's an example of direct to the voters, which now enters showbiz. Now watch this, same candidate, same campaign, but we're going to dress it up a little bit with a little more razzmatazz, and which is then the better or more effective of the two spots? The one you just saw or this one? What do you think? Yeah.
I think that all these commercials have a place, and I think they shouldn't be censored because they totally reflect the candidate. This tells you exactly what they're like. If they're going to
You're
be...
saying they should not be censored?
No, I don't think
In
so.
other words, let them go, and if they get dirty, they'll follow their own way.
Well, let them make a fool of themselves, because most of these, you think less of the candidate who is presenting them. They lose
But
support.
this is hindsight, too. Let's not forget that.
Oh, no, that's not true, because I see lots of commercials today for things, and you think, oh, what an idiot. You know, the person who was putting in the commercial.
I think that's absolutely right. Most candidates who go to negative advertising because their campaign is in trouble. And it gets into worse trouble because they've gone to negative advertising because people generally don't like it.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
Here's the entertainment value of the season. One of the world's great superstars in an exclusive TV offer. TV Records presents the incomparable Engelbert Humperdinck with 20 of his greatest hits.
Please release me, let me go.
Here on 2 stereo records or 8-track tape is the definitive collection of Engelbert's greatest hits. This special TV offer is not available in any store. You can get Engelbert's 20 greatest hits only if you act now.
Let me say size, carry a side by side. I can wait a moment more.
Engelbert's 20 greatest hits contains all his biggest. You'll get Last Waltz, Release Me, Spanish Eyes, and A Man Without Love.
To hold me every day I wake up, then I start to break up. Lonely is a man without love.
More. In all, you get 20 of Engelbert's super hits on 2 stereo records or 8-track tape.
There goes my reason for living.
And remember, this special TV offer is not available in any store. You can get Engelbert 20 greatest hits only if you act now. And here's how to order.
To order, call toll-free 1-800-835-2246, 1-800-835-2246. Save COD charges, send $7.99 for records, $8.99 for 8-track tape to Engelbert, Box 700, Boston, Massachusetts, 02117. Engelbert, Box 700, Boston, or call 1-800-835-2246. Order yours today.
This is really instructive, I think, looking back and taking political commercials. Let's go to 1968 now. Can I just show you this, and then I've got to get this audience in the act. Roll film. A candidate for president, 1968. How do you feel about this?
It isn't easy to grow up in today's complex America. Our children will need twice the number of schoolrooms in their generation. There will be twice the number of cars on the road. Pollution of our air and lakes and rivers may make parts of the land unlivable. Whether or not our children make it depends on who cares about them today. They need people who care in the right places. Robert Kennedy is a man who cares.
F. Kennedy. Here's another spot. Same candidate, same campaign, 1968. And this is a different approach to winning votes, which is, it is fervently hoped will be shown on this program today. All right. Okay. Here it is.
Sure, the people understand that we care.
We should give money to all the,
This man has always been in close touch with young people,
hardly any waste.
and he's never underestimated their ability to understand the present
But the people that live
or to face up to the future.
more white people than black people.
And I think they
There's a lot of poverty you don't see, hear so much about, which is in the rural areas of the country. And I think the government can play a role in that, but I think also private industry can play an important role. And I think there has to be a partnership of private industry and government. It's kind of a partnership that doesn't exist at the moment. and that we are going to put into effect programs which will have some effect on their lives, namely that so people can find jobs, and that they will have some control over their own future, and they'll have some say in their own future.
Kennedy for president. Nebraska can make the difference.
What was the point you wanted to make, Mr. Cantor?
Phil, I wanted to establish, first of all, that with respect to that jingle spot for Bob's older brother, John, there were 150, in excess of 150 different commercials of all lengths made for the Kennedy campaign in 1960. A 60-second version and the 20-second version of the jingle we just saw were the only two that did not deal specifically with issues. It was an identification spot. It was just a jingle to call attention to Kennedy's name. So his television commercials were, in fact, informative throughout, with the exception of the one jingle. The two spots we just saw for Bob Kennedy both dealt with really very much the same subject matter, but presented in dramatically different ways. The first one was a symbolic or representational spot, trying to capture the interest and the attention of the viewer while the announcer voiceover explains to you what it is he wants to say.
That's the steps.
That's the steps, a little child pulling up the toy bus. The second spot showed Bob Kennedy engaged in direct conversation with young children in a classroom, both of them dealing with the same subject. The emphasis in the second one being on an effort to display Bob Kennedy's feeling for children, his personality, and his character.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever, you stage, do you not, Mr. Bailey, some of those corner street conferences with the voters?
Yeah, it's called in the business cinema verite. Do you mean man-in-the-street commercials, or with the candidate?
Where the candidate's talking to the farmer and the...
It's known in the business as sort of cinema verite, that is truth in film. And what is done is, rather than scripting a 30-second spot in advance, you put the candidate in the middle of a group of construction workers or what have you, or school children, and film for an hour, and then reach into that film and pull out the 30 seconds or 60 seconds which best captures issues, personality, and so forth.
But the people who are involved are usually know they're involved in the filming of in the preparation of a political spot, do they not?
They do that, but they're not professional actors, and generally, we've found anyway that it is best to get people involved in those sessions who are not supporters of the candidate, but who have genuine questions or disagreements with the candidate, so you get some live discussion and real action.
Right, but I mean, if somebody, the point is that you select the material that's to be seen.
Of course.
All right.
Commercials are commercials.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. But we're talking not about soap now. We're talking about a man who may or may not take us to war, who's going to make decisions under pressure. My goodness. And he is being presented to us with all the warts taken out.
Phil, there are two kinds of television political communication. One is the free kind, covered by the networks and the stations. They control it. They put the candidate on when they want to. They cover that portion of the campaign they choose to. The candidate, in his own right, buys time, whether it's for spots or for longer program commercials, in which he tries to put his best foot forward and remove as many warts from his face as he can. That's the way our system works.
I'm not a big fan of negative advertising, but one of the reasons that you find it is just what you described. It is my job for my client to put the best face forward of that client.
Yeah.
But if I'm putting the best face forward, then who's describing the warts? The other guy describes my candidate's warts. I describe his candidate's warts.
All right. We'll be back in just a moment.
Hey, big fella.
Huh? Agencies ever take a poll of what the audience is like to hear, these negative campaigns or these positive type?
Political campaigns these days always live with polls, maybe too many polls. And most campaigns that have the money will find some way of pre-testing the advertising before it goes on the air.
Not much time.
I'd like to know how many of the ladies feel that their intelligence is insulted by a lot of these commercials that are really dumb.
Thank you.
Mr. Bailey, could a major political candidate today win without television commercials?
Not if his opponent is running television. It is the dominant fact of life in politics.
Yes.
Well, they better not be poor, or they'll never make it.
That's
They
correct.
might have a lot of good priorities, but...
The biggest problem in politics is not television. It's the fact that television dominates politics, and you got to have money to have television, which means rich candidates.
Here's an example of what I think you think is a good spot, huh? This one here, number 11. Right. Okay, here's roll tape. What do you think of this? 1966.
Before Governor Rockefeller came into office, there was no statewide minimum wage. He made it $1. Four years later, when the price of the minimum meal went up, Governor Rockefeller put the minimum wage up to $1.25. And now that everything's gone up again, he's raised the minimum wage again. Next New Year's Day, it will become $1.50.
You really think so, huh? Well, it worked. He was reelected, yes.
I was just going to say, you've convinced me that these political things are not necessary. They asked at the beginning, because I think the television and the papers have proved that they want the people to hear only what they want to hear. And I watched Jane Byrne when she was on this show, and the next day I read what she said in the paper, and I would say at least 35% of it was absolutely not true. After listening to her one day and reading what she said the next day, I was really appalled. And that's what the American people are getting today. Exactly what you want them to hear or read.
Well, but that's going to be the way it is with television advertising. You're not really expecting a man to pay a price for showing his warts, huh?
I think.
Well, I think that you talk about negative campaigns. I think that all your films were very negative, too. I don't think they were very good films. I'm sorry.
Well, the last one wasn't bad, was it?
Well, I don't know if he didn't say if that was his or not. Was
Right, let's run a test here. Youngstein for mayor of New York. She was not a major party candidate.
Free libertarian.
Okay, but we're getting a little more sophisticated. 1973, New York City mayoralty race. What do you think of this spot?
I'm Fran Youngstein. I'm running for mayor of New York, but I won't try to convince you I'm the best one to run your life. The other candidates say trust them. I say trust only yourself. Taxation is theft. Spend your money as you see fit. Laws restricting pornography, drug use, and homosexuality have no place in a free society and should be repealed. What you do with your body is your business. Don't waste your vote. Vote Youngstein for mayor and tell City Hall, leave me alone.
Well, I don't have any opinion on that one. Although she is telling you what she feels is right, and I give her a lot of credit for that.
Well, she gets a lot of credit from you and no victory, because she didn't win.
Because she's a woman, probably.
I have one comment to make as a layman. I'm a farm boy.
Yeah, so little time.
So little time. I think it's a very dangerous thing. There's such magnitudes of wealth in certain industries and certain peoples that this could be used, and we could develop a Hitler situation if it was exaggerated.
Well, there are a lot of critics who will tell you there are not a whole lot of poor people in the Senate today. Can we just see one more? Can't, huh? I try so hard. We'll be back in just a moment.
It's like floating in space. The Niagara adjustable bed with cyclo-massage units. The Niagara bed adjusts automatically to support your head, back, and legs. Watch TV, read, write, eat and sleep in bed 4 hours in posture-correct comfort.
Script of today's program, send $2.50 in check or money order to Donahue Transcripts, Box 2111, Cincinnati, Ohio 45201. Include the subject or the name of the guest with your request.
That basically...
No big band leader ever captured America's heart like the beloved Glenn Miller, who gave his life playing for our troops overseas in World War II. This is the unique Glenn Miller sound that all America fell in love with. And now, from the priceless RCA Original Masters, come the almost impossible to find Glenn Miller super hits for you to enjoy. Relive your fondest memories. Another Glenn Miller. best of Glenn Miller. The giant record collection is only $7.98. Total tape treasury only $9.98. This exclusive treasury is not sold in any store at any price. To get yours, be sure to order now.
Rush $7.98 for album, $9.98 for 8-track tape to Glenn Miller, Box 370, Brookline, Massachusetts. You must be delighted or money back. So you don't forget, mail before midnight tomorrow. Just $7.98 for album, $9.98 for tape to Glenn Miller, Box 370, Brookline, Massachusetts. Be sure to mail now to Glenn Miller, Box 370, Brookline, Massachusetts. That's Glenn Miller, Box 370, Brookline, Massachusetts, 02146.
I'm Chet Curtis. Join me for Checkpoint tonight on News Center 5.
It's time for the Family Feud, introducing the...
I, like so many others here in, all around the free world, I guess, fell in love with this woman in The Goodbye Girl. I really wanted them to make it, you know? Didn't you? I mean, I felt that, I thought she was a little rough on him. I mean, the guy's trying to make a living, and she couldn't pay her rent, or was it he that couldn't pay his? Just one of the, is anybody a bigger hit than, should I name some of the plays? You know, if you get a play on Broadway, one play, that's your legacy for the rest of your life, and your grandchildren will forever brag about you. Look at this. Barefoot in the Park, The Odd Couple, Plaza Suite, Prisoner of 2nd Avenue, The Sunshine Boys, California Suite, The Odd Couple, Chapter 2, The Heartbreak Kid, Murder by Death. Come on. Can you imagine? Who's got it together? Who's got it together more than Marcia Mason and Neil Simon? Welcome them.
Let's ask mothers what they want their kids to eat for breakfast.
Something good for them, that they'll like to eat.
With plenty of vitamins and minerals.
We gave mothers what they asked for. New Body Buddies. Sweetened corn puffs with 16 vitamins and minerals. More than any other cereal. Body Buddies is a big part of this nutritious breakfast.
Look, no artificial flavors.
Oh, but does it taste good?
Brown sugar and honey.
Oh, boy!
New Body Buddies. In natural fruit flavor, too.
Coffee?
Yeah.
You, downhill?
Downhill, boom.
Maxwell Houses. I'm Chuck.
Christina.
Good to the last drop, Maxwell House.
Nothing brings folks together better than a steaming cup of Maxwell House coffee. Always good to the last drop.
You Svensson?
Yeah.
Me Svensson too.
Good to the last drop, Maxwell House.
Mr. Green,
Yeah.
you need any help?
Mm-mm.
Want my Coke?
No.
Really, you can have it.
Okay. Thanks.
That's the way it should be. I like to say, see you around. The whole world is smiling with me. Coca-Cola as life. Have a Coke and a... Wow, thanks, Joe.
Don't miss Levitt's big President's Sale of the year. Check the newspaper for dozens and dozens of price reductions. And visit the Levitt showroom near you for even more outstanding bargains.
What are you doing?
I'm moving the chair away from the register.
I'm having my fuel dealer tune up my furnace.
I'm adjusting my water heater.
I'm saving $200 on my fuel bill. You can too. You've got the power.
You got the power.
use it.
An energy message from the Office of Lieutenant Governor Tom O'Neill.
Hey, sailor, how come you joined the Navy?
When I came in the Navy, I wanted advanced electronics training. I got it.
I wanted duty on an aircraft carrier, and I got it. I joined for the travel, and I got it.
I see. If you're qualified, the Navy can give you what you want, right?
Right.
The Navy. Find out more from your local recruiter or call toll-free. It's not just a job, it's an adventure.
The movie's titled Chapter 2, you probably knew that. Marcia stars with Jimmy Caan in a movie that's Gene Shalit said you should get an Academy Award. You should be nominated for an Academy Award, and my guess is that he'll want you to be he'll want you to get the Oscar.
Oh, okay.
Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
It's okay with me.
I guess, where do I start with this pair? Did you really tell him you would give up show business for the marriage?
Well, yes, hoping that by saying it, it would not happen.
You really held it back, or was... I'm just impressed with this act of, ultimate act of sacrifice that you were...
Well, you try to do the best you can in the situation. In other words, it's like when I met Neil, I hadn't any plans on getting married or even meeting anybody, but I had been working very hard for 2 years, so I knew what it was like to work very hard and not have somebody special in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So then when I met him and I realized how complete I felt in the relationship with him, and his feelings were such that he was very scared about somebody who might go tripping off every 5 minutes to do a play or a movie or something, I felt that if I was going to commit to a marriage, then I had to shift my priorities. And so I said, yes, I'll stop. I don't know how I'll feel about that 2 years from now, or maybe I'll have to find some way to be creatively satisfied in some way, but I'll try.
I was going to say, the irony of it is that yes, I was very frightened of that, of marrying somebody in the theater, having spent all my life in the theater and in films. Excuse me. My first wife, to whom I was married for 20 years, was not in the theater, although she started as an actress. But we had a very close relationship, and we were never separated. Wherever I went, Joan went. And after Joan died and I met Marcia, I was petrified of the fact of marrying an actress, of not only dealing with the fact that she might be going off someplace, but that we would talk about nothing else but show business.
Boring, very boring.
Yes.
As it turned out, yes, so I asked Marcia that time, I said, listen, I don't think it's going to work out if you're going to stay in the theater or in movies. And
actually,
she said,
he said,
okay.
I hate actresses, and I said, why didn't you tell me that before we got married?
But it turns out that I am doing more work for Marcia or with Marcia than any other actress I've ever done, only because I think she is that good.
Yeah. This isn't fair, I don't know you, I've just met you, but, I mean, if you had 20 years of, you know, of real, what do I want to say? This is not to suggest that your first wife wasn't her own person, but she did not have the professional responsibilities that Marcia has.
Right.
So, you got to be a pretty spoiled guy. I mean, in terms of having wife there on all occasions and on demand, etc.
I still do. Marcia is always there. Mostly because I write the parts. You hang around here, kid. She was offered a movie in Egypt for 14 weeks, and I said, take the house with you and everything else. No, 14 weeks. She didn't want to go through that.
No, actually, he's been fabulous, because the evolution that Neil has gone through from what you actually sort of hit on is a very interesting situation, because Joan wanted very much a one-to-one relationship, as did Neil, and it worked for them for 20 years and for the girls, who are terrific. And I'm totally opposite that kind of experience. I've never been in that kind of place, nor ever wanted that kind of a relationship. It would frighten me too much. But Neil, the thing that I love and continue to respect and grow in admiration about him, quite separate from my personal feelings, is that I met him at a time when society, when life, when he had everything. In other words, he's very successful, he has beautiful children, he had a wonderful relationship with Joan, he's continued with his success. He didn't have to change, in other words, and I'm sure he could have found somebody who would have more than happily met his requirements. And instead what he did was, he said, I want to grow as a human being, I want to change, I want to know what it's like to have a different kind of relationship.
Everybody says that, Marcia.
But they don't do it.
That's right.
You know, they don't do it. And Neil is the kind of person that took all of his fears and all of his anxieties and everything and said, all right, I mean, if she's willing to do this with me, then I'm going to try and do it with her too. And so we embarked on a kind of new relationship for him, which was scary.
Scary because of your success as an actress and so on, but now that, you know, you've done so well with his material, are you driving each other crazy at all? Don't you get on each other's nerves a little
No,
bit?
the worst part about it is that we really, I don't want to see anybody else. I mean...
Oh, that's awful, I know.
No, I mean...
Can you blame her?
I mean, we're not surprised.
I don't know. It's nice because our life is very interesting because we try and make it interesting.
Are you kidding?
No,
Interesting.
Purely from a professional point of view, it is so hard to find, for me, the right actress for a part. And Marsha works so well with my material that she says, I'm just going to take some time off now. I don't want to do a picture for a year. And I am busy right now writing a film for her that I'll finish. What time is it now?
Yeah. You're writing a film right now for her?
Yes.
I just think that's the greatest fantasy. I mean, please. You ought to write a play and title it, They're Singing Our Song. They're Playing Our Song. Now I forgot what I'm going to ask you. Now, just give me a second here.
Was it about me?
It was probably. She must say to you, oh, honey, I mean, this is the dumbest line I have ever, I cannot possibly read this line without looking stupid. Does she say that?
In the nicest possible way.
All right, now, how much of a mother duck were you with the rushes on this and the, I mean, did you say, oh, the lighting?
No, yes, I will go over to her and whisper and very nicely say, that stinks.
Do you, are you there when they're filming?
Yeah.
Oh, that would drive me nuts.
Oh, no. You see, that's the different thing. The wonderful thing about Neil, too, is the fact that when it comes to the work, we share a very strong feeling about the work, which is an extremely objective one. So I would trust, you see, if Neil didn't tell me the truth, I would be very nervous, because you always need somebody who is absolutely there for you in an absolutely clear, positive, objective way.
Yeah, but it's supposed to be the director.
It isn't always.
But... Come on, I'll tell you the truth. I love you, but I don't want you on the set if I'm directing a play, even if it's yours.
No,
That's
I
how
agree with that.
insecure I am.
No, I don't think directors want that. Occasionally they do. They ask. Herb Ross, with whom I work very closely and has done 2 of our films, will turn to me and say, Neil, what do you think? And I say it, but sometimes I sneak around and say it to the actors anyway.
Yeah.
Actually, you want him on the set because it's so much more fun. He's wonderful to be with. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you say you laughed the last more than ever in your life.
Oh,
He really laughs, isn't he? No,
I mean, well, he taught me a
surprised.
terrific sense of humor. I didn't have much of a sense of
It
humor.
won't come out during the show.
No.
I don't see any possibility of jealousy between you two because you do 2 different things.
Are you serious? Oh, you mean jealousy?
Jealousy, professional jealousy.
Oh, no.
Oh, well, hold it.
No. Yes, wait.
Neil Simons.
Someone asked for
Neil Simons, Chapter 2, starring...
Oh, no, I don't have a problem with that, no. Some young girl hits on him. Yes, I have a trouble with it.
I'm sorry about this terribly broad question, Neil, but why, where did you get this formula, and how in the world can you just turn these things out like this in an arena that has had geniuses looking for a bridge because they can't make it?
One of the things is, of course, there's no such thing as formula. There may be if some student were to study the work and say there is a similarity in all of the things, so there is a formula that I am not aware of. But the flow of work comes from a lack of fear, I think.
You're not afraid of failing, you think?
I am, but I don't pay attention to it. I mean, I will pay attention to the fear of failure when it happens, and then I go right into the pits for about a day or 2, and then I say, okay, I've got to either do better on the next project or try to salvage this one. But while I'm working on it, one has to have complete faith and ego, I guess, to say this is good enough to be out there for 20 million people. The minute you start to lose that, I think that's what ties up so many writers, that they go into the office and they look to do so many other things except get to the work. I am never afraid to sit and do the work. It's later on the fear may come about when someone reads it and says this isn't right or this isn't right.
You wrote for Sergeant Bilko, didn't you?
Yeah, it was one of the first things I did.
Yeah. You knew you were clever, did you? I mean, you could put ideas on paper that made people laugh in high school, or when did this happen?
It was in high school. When I was 15 and 16 years old, my brother Danny was the one who said, when I was 12 years old, he said to me, one day you're going to be one of the top comedy writers in America. Danny was always looking for someone to work with him. Danny's 8 years older than I am. And he could never find anybody, and he found them at home. And so he more or less cultivated whatever humor I have, and I think it's what gave me the courage, because Danny was my spokesman for so many years when I was an 18, 19-year-old kid working for CBS and working with someone of the stature of Goodman Ace. I was petrified to be in the room with him. But Danny would do all the talking for me. I was able to do the writing. When we went at home, I was able to sit down at the typewriter and do that. But I needed somebody to be a spokesman.
Yeah.
Now she is.
Can you visualize those actors on the stage when you're? That's the thing that kills me.
Yeah.
How do you get all the? Can you see the paintings on the wall and you get the ambience of the scene?
Well, if you can't write it. If I cannot describe accurately how they're dressed, how they talk, what their fears are, what their foibles are, there's no point in writing about it because I'll reach a blind alley. But I am able to see the entire project from beginning to end, not every minute, every turn of events, but I see the flow of it, of where it is going. Sometimes I start off a project and I don't see where it's going, and they'll end on page 25. I just stick it in the drawer, and I've got 30 plays that end on page 25.
Neil also has a very strong feeling about the work per se. In other words, he always would say to me, just go in and write something down. Nobody ever has to see it. And it's amazing when you think about it, like, especially if you try to do something like writing where you feel you can't. And I'll sit down and I say, I can't get past like the first sentence. And he say, but that's because you're making a judgment on the sentence. He said, what he likes, he really thinks of writing as rewriting. He told me sometimes he will put down anything, even if he knows the line is the worst line in the world, because then, come tomorrow, he goes back and he rewrites it.
Do you make notes on napkins in restaurants, etc.? I mean, when you think of a fun...
Never.
You know what's interesting about that is you have to wonder how many Shakespeares were never blossomed because of this, I don't want anybody to see this, it's dumb,
Right. Well, part of the talent, I don't know what percentage of it is talent, but the other percentage, a great percentage of it, is the discipline of sitting down. And I think maybe those early days on the Bilko and Show of Shows, where we had to do an hour-and-a-half show every single week, made it seem like doing one play a year was a vacation for me.
You wrote for the Jackie Gleason show.
Did you? One week.
Oh, I see. All right. Do you, when you're typing, I assume you type, you don't longhand.
No, not anymore. I go back, I've started longhand because after 25 years of typing, I couldn't move my neck anymore.
Really?
I would drive a car and say, is there anyone behind me, Marcia? I can't see it. I mean, I just literally couldn't move it anymore.
You really are,
well, you do this. First of all, when you write, you are living out the lives of the characters, and you are always writing about people in conflict. So you're putting body English. There's a lot of anger coming out.
You remember when Richard Dreyfuss pulled her panties off that shower thing? I'll never forget that. I can just see, your neck must have hurt when you wrote that. It's true. Okay, I interrupted you, but so how long are the stretches that you go? For how long do you write?
For how long do I write? You mean on a particular project?
Straight, no. In a sitting.
Oh, during a day? Yeah. Oh. Well, it's crazy. I mean, generally I would do maybe 3 or 4 hours, but I'm working on this film now that I am so hot on that I worked 8 or 9 hours a day for about 5 days last week. That's why I don't know who's sitting behind me.
But can you can't go 8 hours without going to the bathroom or something. I mean,
sometimes I swear I forget to go.
Really?
Yes, I forget to go. Then something reminds me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just, all right, one more time now. I know that I feel a little self-conscious asking you this because you've been interviewed sideways and every way. One of the problems of being such a hit is that, such a focus is on you. I can't imagine being in that kind of spotlight where everybody goes to the typewriter. I mean, reviewers try to become great reviewers on reviewing your stuff. I mean, a lot of egos are being expanded by stepping on your material.
Well, it's true. I don't get very good reviews anymore. I got much better reviews with lesser plays in the beginning because critics love to discover you. Afterwards, they love to discover somebody else and compare their work to your work, which they think is fading. Yeah. Fortunately, the audience does not deal with that. And so the last 3 plays that I've done in California, that I originated there, Chapter 2, they're playing our song in California Suite, were all huge hits without good reviews. Yeah. So I don't expect them anymore. And I get irritated when the reviews are not good, but there's nothing I can do about it. It's not going to stop me from my work.
Yeah. Is there a death of a salesman in your soul there, or a miracle worker, or do you care and do you want to, and is that...
You mean about a serious work, completely serious work. The film that I am writing now for Marcia, which is temporarily called Georgia and Friends, is based on an old play of mine called The Gingerbread Lady, which is a woman who is somewhat self-destructive, who suffers from alcoholism, and is a serious piece. I think it has some comedy in it because the woman has a sense of humor. But I don't do things because I want to do a serious piece. That's what this subject calls for.
I really did think you were wonderful in The Goodbye Girl, and I mean, are there women out there saying, sure, look who's writing it for her?
Oh, absolutely.
Does that bug you, Ben? I mean, sure, who couldn't? Look at, she sleeps with the guy, for God's sake. You know. I mean, there's always somebody that's trying to take it away, you know?
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I mean, I think an awful lot of people feel that. And then I think there are probably some actors who probably feel that and won't admit that they even feel that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's also got to be tough. Now, there's a little bit of little bit of a babble, a Hollywood babble about, you know, is Jimmy Caan going to get his due given your relationship? Ta-ta-ta. You've heard that song and dance, huh? I mean, you look like you're not sure.
No, I'm not quite.
Well, you know, that the big emphasis is for Marcia to get the Oscar, and that at least in the hype, Jimmy's being ignored.
Jimmy's not being ignored. I mean, all of the publicity and the advertising is quite equal. Yeah. I think possibly it has a lot to do with the role also. Not to take anything away from Marcia, because I think she is absolutely brilliant in the film. But she is the motivating force in the piece. She is the one who is saying, opt for happiness. Let's pull out of these doldrums. And I think the audience and everybody else automatically roots for the person who is a more positive personality.
Yeah. On your honeymoon nights, you have little things, guilts about your wife who has passed away, and that's...
In the film, yeah.
Yeah. Gosh. That was, you know...
Well, it was true. That's what the basis of it is.
I mean, that must have been a little... That's a mountain to climb, kid.
Well,
I mean, having the ghost around is a tough shot. I mean,
sure
and you got to wonder how many women have sustained the same problem.
It's interesting. I met once a woman who very happily married with about, I believe, 4 or 5 children from his first marriage. His wife had died. Yeah. Her way of dealing with it, interestingly enough, was that she chose not to deal with it. The woman, the pictures were taken away. The children were allowed the relationship. They were older, so it was all right. They were allowed the relationship with their mother who's dead, but it wasn't in front of her. In other words, that was the only way she could handle it. What I did I don't know why, it just seemed to me that the only way to handle it was that Joan had to be a part of our family. And it meant that I had to, it was really my job, in a way, to deal with my own feelings of insecurity and jealousy and envy, because I envy the 20 years they had together. Yeah. So it took me about 2.5, almost 3 years, until one time I happened to be sitting with both girls, Ellen and Nancy, our daughters.
Your teenage daughters, yes.
And I was meditating, actually, and I had this terrific meditation in which I met Joan in my meditation, and I became very good friends with her.
No kidding.
Yeah, it was terrific.
And you're able to have uncomplicated, non-self-conscious dialogue with her daughters, your daughter.
Yes, in terms of Ellen and Nancy, that was the easiest thing. The way it's paid off for me now is that what's wonderful is when Ellen will say to me, oh, well, this is my mother, Marcia. Or Nancy says, this is my mother, Marcia. It makes me feel very good inside.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, that makes me feel
yeah. We're with Neil Simon. We're with Neil Simon and Marcia Mason. Well, did you marry 3 months later?
No. 2.5 weeks later. Where did you get such a bizarre story? Who would wait that long?
21 days. We met on the 3rd of October, the first day. Well, we actually met in the sense that we spent time the first day of the reading of The Good Doctor, and we were married on the 25th of October, and we postponed it a week.
We did. I said, this is crazy. We're rushing into it. Let's wait another week.
Weren't you? Come on, you had to be a little scared.
Are you kidding?
You were really scared.
Numb.
Well, then why did you do it?
I met her at the on the street to go to the doctor's office for the blood test, and she had to help me walk there. I couldn't get there. I said, this is insane.
And he says, we have to postpone. And I said, absolutely, whatever you say.
And then we went back to rehearsal of The Good Doctor, and the producer had a bottle of champagne after we announced we were going to get married, and he said, I hope the show runs longer than the engagement.
Okay, I promise. They're upset because we're going so long here. Just one more, and I promise we'll get this audience in this act. And, you know, you're really, as I don't have to tell Neil, you were a very accomplished actress prior to this union.
That helped, by the way, I think. In terms of dealing with him as Neil
He
Simon.
respected you as a...
She was nominated for Cinderella Liberty for the Academy Award before we met.
It has a great deal to do with being able to handle his success. In other words, I can understand some feelings that a woman or a wife might have towards a very successful man if one doesn't have somewhat of your own kind of world to hold on to.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I do. Now the question is, aren't we going to reach a point where we're going to, I love you, dear, but let me try somebody else's material?
Oh, she
but
does.
I do. I mean, I did Promises in the Dark right after I finished Chapter 2, and they actually wound up coming out together. Mm-hmm. And I have 2 projects that I've been working on, a more creative aspect. I have nothing to do with Neil.
Now, how do we get this talented and beautiful young woman out of your consciousness when you're writing? I mean, I assume you don't want to necessarily have her controlling your imagination.
I have done 18 plays, none of them, only one with Marcia.
Okay, well,
no.
Most of those were written prior to the...
His next film is with Goldie Hawn, Chuck Grodin, and Chevy Chase.
And it is something that I once considered Marcia for, but then I thought, no, I think it's wrong. I think Goldie Hawn is really the right girl for this film.
Mm-hmm. We're with Neil Simon and Marcia Mason, who stars with Jimmy Caan in the film titled Chapter 2, a piece of which we'll be happy to share with you. And we'll be back in a moment.
They took their name from the divine typhoon that saved Japan from the Mongol invasion. In battle, they carried family swords of great antiquity. They wore the traditional hachimaki headband to symbolize samurai courage. Most of them were little more than boys who wanted to die like men. They were the kamikaze. You'll meet them along with the Americans who met their challenge when you find this announcement from Time Life Books. It's in your TV guide, and it invites you to sample the epic series that brings you face-to-face with men at war. This reply card brings you Volume 1 of World War II for free examination. And see this print collection of authentic fighter planes? We'll send it to you as a gift if you find the kamikaze's plane on your card and cross it out. Like this. The kamikaze and the Americans who stopped them come alive in your TV guide and these publications.
Introducing new Betty Crocker Light Style Cake and new Light Style Frosting. There's something really different about them that...
Don't tell me, it's the frosting. Smooth, but not different. Don't tell me, it's the cake. Moist, but not different.
What he doesn't know is that new Light Style is 1/3 less in calories than our regular layer cake and frosting mix.
Don't tell me.
And if we don't tell him, he'll never know.
You and Betty Crocker can bake someone happy.
Don't tell me. Give me another piece and I'll figure it out.
Butterball presents...
The spirits of the first turkey lovers.
Wait till Daddy sees turkey.
A turkey dinner for so small a gathering? Without all the kinfolk?
Presenting Little Butterball, plump and juicy as Big Butterball, only smaller. Makes any dinner special.
Turkey, I love it.
Me too.
Thou never made my dinner special with a wee bird. Thou never made dinner.
Little Butterball, one of 3 delicious ways to make any dinner special.
Scotchu! 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 Scotchu!
In the never-ending war against colds, allergies, and sniffles of all kinds.
you have a powerful ally. Soft, strong Scotty's facial tissues. The first word in sneezes.
Shoot!
We're with Neil Simon and Marcia Mason. Not an odd couple. A couple very much in tune. Yes.
I want to know, Marcia, is this your first marriage?
My second. I was married to an actor when I first went to New York called Gary Campbell, who has now become a painter. And he lives in Los Angeles. As a matter of fact, we're friends. I mean, it's all good. It's fine.
Marcia and Neil, in the movie, there's a love scene, and you've just finished making love, and he looks up and he's very flustered because Joan's picture is there, and he gets up and leaves the room. How long did the picture stay on the nightstand? Is that was it really there?
You mean in our life, how long? The pictures of Joan are still there. I mean, it's not on the nightstand. They're there. But...
you remember now that Joan's teenage daughters, now proudly calling Marcia mother, live with them. So let's make that point. Yeah, and you were going to say
I
what?
have Joan's pictures in my office. I would never want to be without them.
Yeah.
Neil was there was never a picture of Joan on a nightstand, but he was always very sensitive to that, but at the same time trying to keep a balance for the girls as well. And it was all right with me.
Okay, Neil, to change the subject, when you submit a play, can you feel inside you that it's going to be a success or it's not going to be so successful?
I have a fairly good idea. I can only tell in terms of the audience. I can't tell in terms of critics. But I do have to wait until I show it to some people that I respect to get some feedback, because I am very easily prepared for them to say, no, it just doesn't work. And if 4 or 5 people I respect say that, then I guess they're right. But I think I have a good average about knowing.
Is the caller there? Thank you for waiting.
Yeah. Mr. Simon, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Since I'm a professional comedy writer, you know, I have a little statue of you that I pray to every day.
You're a guru.
But anyway, but I wanted to ask 2 questions. One is very short and one probably a little bit longer. The first question is, whenever I go out socially, people always say to me, say something funny. I usually say delicatessen. I don't know what else to say. The other thing is, I'd like to know what you do, although I don't suppose people bug you like that. But the most important question is, so often when we see these macho movie actors being interviewed, they're always saying when they walk into a bar or something, somebody always tries to say, hey, I'm tougher than you are. Now, do you get this in an intellectual way with comedy? Do people do the fastest gun in the West thing on you with trying to be funnier?
Toppers, yeah.
Funny things.
Neil Simon, comment.
Yes, I walk into a bar and a guy says, I'm funnier than you, and he pulls out his wit on me, and he beats me to the pun. No, I don't have problems that way, and I don't worry about being funny. The only place I attempt to be funny mostly is in my work. If it comes out in life, it comes out only because the situation calls for it. I'm not really very big on trying to entertain people during the day. I'm not one of those people who's on all the time.
How many siblings? I know, Danny, you have a brother who wrote with you for a while.
That's it.
And that's it. He's older.
Yeah.
Something. Okay, and are you a street kid?
Oh, yeah, New York street kid, yes. We still have an apartment in New York, and I have to go back and get those juices going all the time.
Now you're in Bel Air, which is perhaps the most exclusive neighborhood in the world.
Well, listen, I want to give you an image of Bel Air. People think it's the greatest place in the world. If you don't get hit by the earthquake or the floods or the fires, you're lucky that you get through the day. I mean, it's the poshest way to die in the world, really.
You say also that the only thing Californians read is the license plate in front of them. Is that...
Well, that's one of those attempts at being humorous. No, they are not devoid of
But they're different,
culture
huh?
there.
They're different.
They're a little laid back, yeah.
There's not the energy in Los Angeles that there is in New York.
Well, there is for me. I've been more prolific in the 5 years I've been there than in any 5 years in New York. That's completely up to the individual. People do work hard. You just don't get the hustle and bustle on the streets that you see in New York, so you don't see the energy, but it's in the building someplace.
So you're here to say, as though the Chamber of Commerce has just called you to make sure you're a good boy, that both coasts are wonderful?
Yes, it depends what you want out of life. I am fortunate enough to get both now because I love the energy of New York, and I love the earthquakes and the floods. And
But you were nodding as if to say that New York is different. And
oh, sure, because I think that immediate bustle is important. I think you can be carried along in New York by the energy of the city itself, whereas in Los Angeles, you must make an effort to create your own energy. Otherwise, you become asleep. You become, I think it could hurt you. Do you know what I mean? You get so laid back. It becomes so exotic in a way. And it's easy, more temperate. And so in terms of a certain amount of assertiveness, you have to kind of move your own cylinders a little.
And we'll be back with Marcia and Neil in just a moment.
You're looking light all over. You're looking good to me. You're looking Pepsi light, and it's just 1 calorie. Taking light, taking Pepsi light. Refreshing 'cause it's lemony. Looking light, looking Pepsi light. When it's 1 calorie. Looking light, looking Pepsi light.
The basic things we used to know, was it so long ago? Where did those basic values go?
There's never been anyone quite like Norman Rockwell. His paintings captured the basic values of American life. Now Purity Supreme is bringing you these exclusive wood and glass framed Rockwell prints, 30 in all, for only $2.99 each. $2.99. A terrific value at Purity, your basic value store.
Introducing a whole new kind of egg from Cadbury that's only around till Easter. Its shell is pure, rich Cadbury milk chocolate. But look, inside sits a sweet, creamy yellow yolk surrounded by delicious white filling. Cream eggs from Cadbury. Why, they're the best thing to come along since the Easter Bunny. And when he's gone, they're gone.
There is only one straight-A student in this second-grade classroom, and he is the only student with cerebral palsy. Although this child is impaired both physically and verbally, he is able to learn with the help of his teachers and fellow students and the use of this special typewriter. If you are the parent of a child between the ages of 3 and 21 who has special needs and is not in school, call Mass Child Search, toll-free at 1-800-882-1424.
Thursday night at 7:30, Dr. Timothy Johnson explores the intricacies of the most complex and efficient machine in the world, the human body. Along with experts from the medical world, Dr. Johnson shows you how to keep things running smoothly. He'll report on the latest medical breakthroughs and give you an opportunity to ask questions. House Call with Dr. Timothy Johnson, Thursday night, 7:30 on Channel 5.
The new tradition, Channel 5 and you.
The movie is titled Chapter 2, or with its star and its author.
I was wondering how it felt playing yourself in Chapter 2.
By the time I got to play the movie, I really felt quite separate from the character because a lot of time had passed by. But prior to that, I was a little nervous about whatever problems I might have. I just didn't know because one doesn't usually get that opportunity. But it turned out terrific.
Marcia, I would like to ask, well, first of all, you know, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy.
Yes, that's true.
So would you like to tell us something about your home life? Do you take trips or something or other to get away from your busy time?
Oh, sure. Usually I have time. I don't work as hard as it looks, but I have time off, and I like to garden a lot. And we try to make trips for ourselves where the two of us can just get away. And I enjoy just sort of laying around at home.
Where does your ambition? Have you ever knocked off for a year and gone fishing?
A year?
Yeah.
No.
6 months?
No, once overnight, I think.
You're really that way, huh?
No, I'm not that way. Honestly, I don't write. If you count the days that I write, I don't think I write more than 7 months of the year. I play tennis almost every day.
Really?
Maybe 5 times a week.
Did you say you have 35-page scripts all over the house? Is that what you're saying? That you often finish or start a project?
Yes, I have plays, maybe 24 plays that are about 35 pages long.
And your point is what? That you just said this is going nowhere the hell with it?
Right, yeah, there's no point investing more time in something that I can see is going downhill. However, I have done that with a number of projects that I've gone back to, like Barefoot in the Park and the Sunshine Boys. A year later, I finished them. The Gingerbread Lady has been sitting around for 10 years as a play I've always flirted with the idea of making it into a film, but I never figured out how to do it until last month. It suddenly came clear to me.
This is one of those most best worst questions. What scene really do you want your grandchildren to know you wrote? What scene?
It's
what
the second
moment?
act in King Lear.
I knew I was going to like it.
Well, it's strange. There's a, there's a scene in The Good Doctor, which is Chekhovian, because it is based on a Chekhov short story, and it's called The Seduction. And I like it most, not because I think it is the best, but it is so far afield from what I have done in the past. But the other one, I think, is the English couple in California Suite, the Maggie Smith and Michael Caine scene. I think is the best writing that I've done.
Let me get some folks out here. Thanks for waiting. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Go right ahead.
I'd like to ask Mr. Simon. I major in communication arts over at Loyola University, and I was wondering, do you find it harder to write a play or a screenplay?
Well, excuse me, they're both difficult. I think if you're not trained in the theater, if you don't spend a lot of time in the theater makes greater demands because you probably only have that one set and 3 or 4 characters, and so you've got to tell the story within the confines of that proscenium theater, whereas a film, you can go anywhere, you can do anything. There are very few limitations. So I think playwriting is a much more difficult art.
But you know the last act before you begin to write a play.
No, I don't. I don't, because, well, it takes the joy out of it. It's like if you knew the last act when you went in to see a play, you wouldn't want to stay for it. I don't either. I want to come to it. I have a pretty good idea in my mind about what it might be, but I am willing to let it surprise me.
Yeah. You wrote the screenplay for Heartbreak Kid.
You're right.
And that was from a book, huh?
No, it was from a 4-page short story by Bruce J. Friedman.
Guy Falls in Love on His Honeymoon. I will never forget that movie. I tell you, I couldn't believe that. I'm still not over that.
I know. That's one of my favorites. I love that.
And the movie didn't lose money, but it wasn't the hit it should have been.
Well, it's not everybody's ideal of a love story. You know, a man falls in love with somebody else on his honeymoon.
Yeah.
But the character development in that thing, I mean, this guy was crazy.
Yes.
I mean, he really was a little goofy. I mean, he was a guy who once the girl said yes, he wasn't interested. Did I overdo the analysis here?
No, that's absolutely right. It was very esoteric material, and it was a bit far out. It drove some people nuts when they watched it. But it was quite a successful film.
Thanks for waiting. Hi.
Yeah, hello. I was just wondering, oh, I'm nervous.
Yeah, I know how you feel. You want to get it together? Hang on just a second. Yeah, hang on a minute. I know how you feel.
Hi, Marcia.
Hi.
Earlier you made reference to meditation, and I once read that meditation is very much a big part of your life.
That's right.
I'd love to hear more about it.
I'm a devotee of a man by the name of Swami Muktananda, who is an East Indian. He is a Siddha yogi, and I met him about 5.5 years ago through a friend of mine, and basically Siddha yoga is a yoga of meditation, in which the concept basically is that you turn inward to meditate upon yourself, where God exists within you as you. And the more practical aspect of it, without the spiritual connotation, is simply that you turn inward in order to be able to focus yourself and your energies so that you have a joyful, full, productive life with an understanding of why you're really here.
And you do that for a daily?
Yes.
For about?
Well, it depends. Like sometimes I've only meditated 15 or 20 minutes. Sometimes I've meditated 45. Sometimes, you know, it depends.
You don't?
I hire someone to do it for me. I'm so
Is that in a play?
Me.
That's got to go in a script. That's got to go in a script. Do you drink?
No, I don't.
Nothing.
A little Perrier, a little wine once in a while.
I've heard about the guy with the typewriter who's got the bourbon on the rocks, and I wonder how he does it.
I think it's impossible to write under the influence of alcohol, drugs.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's not slurring his speech, but I mean, even the little bit can probably alter your your energy.
The truth, I feel so high when I'm writing that I don't need any stimulant because you're transported to some other place.
Yeah.
It's all in there, and it's a nice world.
You must be physically exhausted when you're finished, huh?
More exhausted than when I play 5 sets of tennis. I mean, I have to creep away from the typewriter if I put in a full day.
Do you have a favorite play, Doctor? I mean, isn't there always somebody who will come in and say, Neil, this scene, if you could just, it needs, or no?
No one person. I trust Marcia's judgment a great deal, my producer, Manny Eisenberg, the director I work with.
Set this scene up for us. Chapter 2, writer meets actress, writer recently widowed meets actress.
Yeah, and this is more or less a blind date arranged by her best friend and his brother, and they have not seen each other. And so rather than take the chance of going through an awful night, he says, why don't I come over to your house, we'll spend 5 minutes with each other, look each other over, and if we like it, we can make a date for the future.
They have never met?
No. They've never met. They've spoken on the phone.
All right, and this scene is the meeting?
Yes.
I believe so, yeah.
Oh, okay. Roll film. Jimmy Caan, Marcia Mason, Chapter 2.
I'm 42.
Today?
No, just in general.
Was that statement of some historic importance?
No, I just wanted you to know because you look to be about in your late 20s, and I feel like I'm acting 17. I didn't want you to think I was too young for you.
I'm 34.
34. It's a good year for women. So, what do you think?
About what?
About me.
God, you really like to come right to the point, don't you?
I'm not always this direct, but we are fighting the clock.
Well, my hunch is you're a very interesting person, George.
My advice to you is to play your hunches.
Can I get you more wine?
No, thanks. I better be going.
Oh, time's up?
Well, I don't need any more. I think I know what my next move is.
Really? What's that?
I'd like to make a regulation date, your basic, normal hours, 7 to 12.
You mean with grown-up clothes and makeup?
Bath, shower, everything.
You think we're ready for the big time?
And we just spent 4 minutes in the minors. I think we can move up.
Okay, why not? Let's make it.
Terrific. What's today?
Tuesday.
How's Wednesday?
Wednesday works out well.
You could have played hard to get and make it Thursday.
Well, let's stick with Wednesday. I'll keep you waiting half an hour.
It's fair enough. This was really, very nice. I'm glad we met, Jenny.
So am I, George.
I can't believe that you come from the same man that gave us Bambi and Vilma.
Okay.
Do you base a lot of your work on people you actually know, or is it more drawn from just ideas you come with yourself?
Well, the majority of the plays, not the musicals and not all of the films, but the majority of the plays come from some personal experience. They're either autobiographical or about people very close to me, but it's almost impossible to make it up about people I have never met.
Mr. Simon, how much does television or books or movies influence your writing?
Well, it would probably be subconsciously, because I try not to take anything from books, movies, or television. I try to take it from life. But when I see something really good, specifically in movies, I think, and in books, it'll incorporate itself into my way of thinking.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
Introducing Sock Sense Socks. You don't get whistles when your socks fall down. You won't make points if your feet ache all around. You're not debonair if they rip and tear. So put your best foot forward with Sock Sense. Sock Sense stay off wash after wash. Have reinforced heels and toes and a comfortable cotton cushion all over the foot. So put your best foot forward with Sock Sense. New from No Nonsense in food, drug, and other stores.
Don't miss this special offer in the magazine section of Sunday's paper. It's a super sale on Armstrong ceilings, and that means super savings.
You can buy ceiling tiles that go right over your old ceiling, or suspended ceilings that you can hang even where there is no ceiling. And when you buy at least 120 square feet of selected Armstrong ceilings, you can get your choice of one of these Black & Decker power tools free.
It's a great tool offer and a super sale on Armstrong ceilings. Look for the details this Sunday.
Last year, 1 million unlocked cars were stolen. So if you can't take it with you, lock it up. Massachusetts Crime Watch suggests you lock it and pocket the key.
One of the most obvious and visible signs of life is the act of breathing. It is something we must all do to stay alive day in and day out. Why do we breathe?
So the air, like, goes into your lungs and you get fuel.
In a 24-hour period, the average human breathes about 41,000 quarts of air.
Dr. Tim Johnson. Very, very lucid and informing several-part series on Illinois and the criminally insane and who gets to plead what and under what circumstances does the criminal or the alleged criminal who is found innocent get out of the institution back into a free society. Also here is the president of the New York Civil Liberties Union, and we have 3 people who have had the misfortune of being placed in mental institutions, and they didn't like it even a little bit. Ken Donaldson was the man who brought to the Supreme Court a case which alleged you were denied your constitutional rights. You won, and a Florida institution was obliged to pay you $20,000. One of the things that you felt perhaps we didn't touch on as thoroughly as we should have on our first show is what happens in this institution. You're really poked and pulled and pushed and generally treated as, is it your position?
Most of my friends died in the institution. I wouldn't be here today if they had forced treatment on me. I'm a longtime student of Christian Science. We don't know why they respected that at the time. There was no precedent in the law or psychiatry. But I wouldn't have lived through the abuse of confinement, the poor food, the noise. The noise will kill people.
Janet Gotkin is a former mental patient in from New York State. I guess there are horror stories of people being placed in institutions for the vapors or for hot and cold flashes at menopause time, and there are these stories.
Well, the stories abound. They are in the hundreds of thousands every year in public institutions and private institutions. What goes on inside of a mental institution is a process, a rapid process of dehumanization and humiliation. And what passes for treatment, we call torture, because that's what it's like to take those drugs. And people die from the drugs, and people suffer excruciating things from the drugs.
You know, I don't want to sound patronizing, but the 3 of you look so good. You know, we all want to look like you, all us men want to look like you when we're 71, Mr. Donaldson. So clearly you not only survived this, but...
Credit psychiatry.
I'll tell you one of the things that makes us look good. We've all decided that what happened to us is so awful that we've come out to try to fight against it and try to make changes in the system. And that energy and that anger and that determination is keeping us very alive and very happy and very productive people.
Ray Unzicker is from South Dakota. You were institutionalized in the state of Kansas.
Yes, and also in South Dakota for a short time.
How long were you in?
I was in for a total of about a year, but I was in the system itself for 12 years, behind the desks and across the rooms.
Okay, but you couldn't get out. Wasn't that one of the problems?
That was the big problem, the first institution. I went in voluntarily, and there was a law that said if you want out, you sign a 5-day notice and you write this letter to the superintendent, and we'll let you out. And so I did that, and they committed me.
All right, this book titled Cold Storage is the book by Wendell Rawls about Farview State Hospital for the Criminally Insane. Let me just share a couple of pictures. Just walk us briefly through this, if you would, Mr. Rawls.
All right.
We've got...
This is a picture taken by an inmate with a secret camera, interestingly enough, smuggled into the hospital by a guard for him, which shows a man under extreme drug stress. This shows you that it's not a hospital at all. In fact, it was nothing but a prison. These are the pills that were easily accessible to all the patients. They would do various things, and contraband whiskey was always available for a price. And this is a patient, I'm sure a posed picture again taken of men shooting up. This is the Pennsylvania State Senate Investigating Committee looking at the hospital after the series ran in the Philadelphia Inquirer. Again, another picture by Bill Thomas showing the state and the therapy. You can see what an interesting day these patients have on and below benches. And there's a guard who, the guards were always claiming that they were constantly being terrorized and fearing for their lives, and that one was sound asleep sitting on duty. And this is their recreation, a couple of bowling alleys and some roller skates, and one man is partaking. The truth of the matter is there was no therapy at Farview except drug therapy. And talking about inside the hospital, it was interesting that for the superintendent of that hospital, who left because he was so frustrated after a while, He clocked with a stopwatch 7 minutes from the time an entire ward of men entered the cafeteria to eat breakfast till they left. 7 minutes for all of them. No napkins, no toilet paper on the ward, one sheet if you were a good boy. That was the quote. If you're a good boy, you get one sheet. Otherwise, you use newspaper, magazine, whatever you can find, perhaps nothing. Yeah. Allowed to shave maybe once a week, allowed to shower every 2 weeks. Say they have no towel, so a man doesn't get to dry off. He puts his clothing back on him. Just a hellhole.
Illinois is in the middle of trying to resolve or adjudicate the worst mass murder in the history of the world. Isn't that right? John Wayne Gacy, 30, how many?
3.
33 bodies found in various parts of his home, 2 or 3 found in a nearby creek. All right. So now we have to deal not only with what we do with the John Wayne Gacys, how we examine them, but what kind of pleas the Constitution allows them to make in court, and are we going to adhere to the basic tenet that if I don't know what I'm doing, I can't be found guilty? In other words, in traditional Judeo-Christian ethic
and English common law,
if a person has no idea what he's doing, you can't find him guilty for it. I mean, that's in the Bible, isn't it?
That's in the Bible and the law, for
sure. Steps forward now, Carol Marine. We'll show your second piece just in a bit, but before we do, can you give us just an overview here? Wouldn't Gacy go to Fireview? Wouldn't that be one of the institutions, an institution like that, had this happened in Pennsylvania?
If he was in Pennsylvania, then I presume he would go to Fireview.
Yes,
in Illinois, if he was found not guilty by reason of insanity, he most probably would go to Chester, downstate, which is a maximum security institution for the criminally insane.
Would he go there in advance of the trial until they say until they have a man can't stand trial until you find that he knows what's happening.
That he's fit to stand trial.
Right.
Correct. And you see, there are institutions here up in Chicago which are dealing or have dealt with John Gacy, both in evaluation and some attempt to see if he needs treatment. The question, though, is really going to be whether or not the jury or the society is willing to say that this person is insane, because if they do, they might not be able to punish him in that sense.
Well, right now we are saying that we are allowing insanity as a legal...
As a defense, but it's going to depend on whether or not the jury accepts that he was insane.
And in Pennsylvania, it was a very interesting concept that these very right-wing guards, very uneducated, untrained, right-wing...
Rural, it's okay to be rural. We don't want to make...
yes, there's nothing wrong with being rural.
But you have a predominantly urban population.
But very much an urban population. But when these patients would come there, or these criminals commit the crimes, would come to the hospital and they had been found to be insane or were waiting competency hearings, these men take on themselves, we'll punish them. If society won't punish them, we will punish them. They're going to pay for the crime. Now, they're going to pay for it in the court, or they're going to pay for it in this hospital. But they're going to pay for that crime, and many of them would never leave there alive.
And the proposed change in the law is the idea, but that we may change our law to, and Michigan already has, and Indiana has, is to say, we'll give a person treatment for a short period of time, but then we'll put them in prison once we declare them better. That's the new option that this new law would provide in mental illness defenses.
All right, now the president of the American Psychiatric Association steps forward to say, yes, this is a dilemma, yes, it's complicated, yes, there are abuses, and I assume your association is examining them, and you'd like to see them remedied, but I think you're also saying that there are some overstatements here. There's some excesses, you believe?
Well, we're putting all sorts of things together that don't belong together, in my view. We're putting together institutions for the criminally insane with ordinary hospitals, with VA hospitals, with private hospitals.
You mean in our dialogue we are?
Yes, and we're talking about them as if they're all the same. Now, my view, and I don't want to speak at this point for the American Psychiatric Association, but my view is that clearly the kind of person you're talking about is a problem for the criminal law. And psychiatry should not have the major role in it. Well, and the criminal law and the courts have to decide what is to happen.
But the criminal courts people can't decide unless they have your good counsel. You're the person who is trained to figure out what's inside my head and let the people know what should be done with it.
What I can do is a very limited thing. I'm trained to understand what's going on inside your head. It may be that what is needed occasionally is someone to translate, someone to help a judge and jury understand thoughts which they otherwise can't get from the person who is allegedly mentally ill.
We're doing that now, are we not? Aren't you doing that with your testimony in criminal trials? Doctor, did you examine the patient? Yes, I examined the patient. What do you find? I find the patient is We've all seen that in movies and everywhere, in court every day.
I understand, but what they are trying to decide when we go through what we're going through is what they're trying to do is get the psychiatrist's view about whether this is a person who justly can be punished or not. And my claim is that psychiatrists don't know who justly should be punished. All we can do occasionally is say, well, with this particular person, he has this set of ideas which you weren't aware of. Now that you know his ideas or her ideas, now what you think, now that you understand what this man was thinking when he killed those people, it's up to you to decide whether this is a person to be punished or not. It's not up to psychiatry.
But you don't want to take away your responsibility to make a contribution in the courtroom.
As long as it's understood that it's a very limited contribution.
Okay, see, because you're very close to saying, here's what we've got. We've got not guilty by reason of insanity, not. Whether you and I like it, it's there.
Yes.
And we can't, there is no other discipline to which we can turn for information regarding insanity except you guys and you women that we flippantly call shrinks. You're all we've got. And you're stepping forward here to say, boy, you know, this is very limited. Nobody's that smart. You don't have a crystal ball. This is an inexact science.
No, I don't agree with what you're saying. I think the dilemma is quite different. I think that we don't really want to forgive people. I think that the real answer is that we never have wanted to forgive people who are mass murderers because they are insane. We have never wanted to.
So it's an attitude.
It's a fraud. And from time immemorial, people who were found not guilty by reason of insanity were locked in institutions like those that Mr. Rawls described to you at Farview. Instead of going to prison for the rest of their lives, they simply went to a place like that. Now, that is total hypocrisy. What has happened in the last 5 or 10 years as a result of legal developments which have nothing to do with psychiatry, which has to do more with the American Civil Liberties Union, people like that can get out. And now we're...
People like who can get out?
People who have been found not guilty by reason of insanity. The kind of people who were stored for years now get out. And now the community is saying, hey, what's going on here?
Right. Carol Marine has a report which speaks exactly to that issue. We'll have that in just a moment, all right? You were nodding affirmatively. You know, not only do we not want these not guilty by reason of insanity people to get out, we're not too crazy about talking with people who've been described. We don't want to touch them, have lunch with them, have them live next door to us. So he's got a point. Oh, yeah. We have a real attitudinal problem here.
It's an attitudinal problem. It's a socioeconomic problem. It's a political problem more than anything else, in my view, because once you, let's say this, let me get it, communities will fight to the death, practically, to keep an institution, a state institution, from being built in their community to house these people.
Yes.
Once that is there, and the people in the community work there, and they derive their income from that, and they depend on it economically, and the businesses depend on servicing it. You try getting it out of that community, and they will say, God, we've got to have it here.
You don't deny that. We've got too many institutions in too many places that are too far removed from urban centers where the professional people are.
No.
Can we expect Dr. Stone or any of your colleagues to get in a car and drive 6 miles to see an indigent patient who is locked up in a mental institution?
In most places, it's not 6 miles, it's 60 miles.
All right. And listen, you know what's interesting? The same thing to be said of prisons.
Oh, yes.
You know, the brand new multi-million-dollar facility in Ohio is located near Portsmouth. It couldn't be farther away from the state's largest city, Cleveland. It couldn't be farther away. To have your mother visit you takes 2 days. Whether or not she gets a hotel room is a problematic. If she's an indigent, she takes the bus.
But that's exactly what he's talking about. It's exactly the same thing for prisons as well as mental hospitals, that you'll find that the communities reject them until they're there, and then they are a source of income, and then they're institutionalized in the community.
In Pennsylvania, the governor is trying to close Farview. Richard Thornburg is
Where is Farview?
It's in northeastern Pennsylvania, about 30 miles northeast of Scranton, in the foothills of the Moosic Mountains, the Pocono Mountains.
So it's far from Philadelphia and Pittsburgh.
It's a 5-hour drive from Philadelphia. It's an 8 or 9-hour drive, perhaps, from Pittsburgh. And the patients are, by and large, come from those two metropolitan areas. And he's trying to get them moved where they build a facility, forensic unit in Philadelphia and one in Pittsburgh. And the legislators said, no, you're not going to move them. And the others said, no, we're not going to let them come in our community. So everybody's fighting. So he's sitting there saying, my God, what do I do now?
What do we do now? It's an important question. We're all in this, and we hope you'll join us.
blah.
Mary Callanan has a headache.
Would you try extra-strength Tylenol if I thought it would help?
Compare the levels of medicine in the leading regular and extra ingredient pain relievers. Extra strength Tylenol has more medicine.
It's gone, it's gone. It's complete relief, and I just love that. There's extra strength Tylenol. It's great.
Extra strength Tylenol, aspirin free, and you can't buy a more potent pain reliever without a prescription.
The headache's gone, which is grand.
I won, Mom! Wish I could help my Billy do better in school.
You can. Make sure he gets a good breakfast.
That can help?
A university study found a good breakfast gives children a better attitude toward schoolwork.
Makes sense.
And in our house, good breakfasts start with Tang. Tang has a full day supply of vitamin C in every glass and a bright, fresh orange taste we all love. Tang Instant Breakfast Drink is a great start towards a good breakfast. And a good breakfast gives them a better chance.
You're feeling good about yourself. It shows the way you should about yourself.
You're feeling good about yourself. You're drinking Diet Pepsi-Cola with just 1 calorie and that great honest-to-Pepsi taste. And it shows in the way you look, the way you feel, and in everything you do.
And you're drinking 1 calorie on your Pepsi. Yeah, you're drinking 1 calorie on your Pepsi. And it shows.
What do you like? I'd like a big, juicy hamburger. Pepperoni pizza.
What I'd like is to go out for dinner.
Everybody wins in Papa Gino's Big Pizza Payoff. Win a free pizza, win discounts, maybe even win a Crimson Travel vacation for 2 in Hawaii. Every ticket's a winner at all Papa Gino's in the Big Pizza Payoff.
What you like is what you get. What you like is what you get at Papa Gino's.
Hey, sailor, how come you joined the Navy?
When I came in the Navy, I wanted advanced electronics training. I got it.
I wanted duty on an aircraft carrier, and I got it. I joined for the travel, and I got it.
I see. If you're qualified, the Navy can give you what you want, right?
Right.
The Navy. Find out more from your local recruiter or call toll-free. It's not just a job, it's an adventure.
I'd like to address my question, Mr. Rawls. In all the research or the study you have done, what about these people that run these places? What kind of people are they that would do something like this?
They are insensitive.
They should be in the place, not these other people.
That was the contention of most of the patients. They were, in fact, at one point, they ran an experiment at Farview one time just for fun among some of those that were more trusted. And a group of residents from a hospital came to visit the hospital, and they put on the prison garb and put 10 of these patients that were by and large articulate and in good shape, put them in smocks, in medical jackets, and then they brought another group in and lawyers and said, which one of the patients was it? And they couldn't tell the difference in the conversation. See, there's a place in these hospitals, many people you'll find, like Kenneth was talking about, are paranoid schizophrenics. That's what they are said to be. And so you have an institution run on terror, and everybody's afraid of everybody else, and the guards have convinced each other that the patients are after them, and the patients are convinced the guards are after them, and that the other patients are after them, and so they just feed on the paranoia that they're supposedly there being treated for.
Yes, I have a question for Ray. You said you had a twin. Mm-hmm. Did she have any history of mental illness? And
I cannot speak for my twin sister.
No.
I can say that from my observations, my sister's problems came in a different way than mine. She acted them out and did things that were socially unacceptable. But she is fine now, as am I.
We should say that in our first program, you said that you suffered from disassociation, as it would be called by psychiatrists.
And a lot of other things.
That's where you come out of your body and actually see things happening, is that it?
Yes, I could still do that right now if I chose. But now it's something that I choose to do, as is being well,
right,
or what I call being not crazy.
Right. And you were institutionalized when you were a teenager?
Yes. I started seeing shrinks at age 12. I stopped at age 24.
Yeah. And the worst, you never committed a crime or you did attempt suicide?
13 times.
Mm-hmm.
But the important point is, we've been talking about people who've committed mass murders or criminal justice people. In New York, for example, there are less than 100 people who have been found not guilty by reason of insanity. That's in a very, very small percentage.
In what period of time? Forever?
In the last, 20 years or something.
Only 100?
And yet there are 20,000 people who are like Ray, who are confined in mental hospitals who didn't do a thing wrong.
That's right.
And that's a much more typical problem.
These are two issues that are very
Chris Hansen is with the
confusing.
New York Civil Liberties Union. That accounts for your...
I was hoping to say before also that when we talk and concentrate on the mass murderers, we forget that they are a tiny, tiny percentage of the people
That's
in
what I've
mental
been trying to
hospitals.
say. Things are out of focus.
Okay, put it in focus for us, Mr.
There's a very
Donahue.
small percentage of people who are actually nuts and who are dangerous. My whole story is that most of the 800,000 people locked up every year are not dangerous. They are not nuts. They don't need a psychiatrist.
I know that.
That's the big point.
But let's not miss Dr. Stone's point. It is the John Wayne Gacy's. The front page people are what determine our attitudes about this whole...
Then it's important to take those threads apart and
That's
realize that we're talking about two different populations.
The audience here, the public in general, don't take the things apart.
And we have to really...
That's the big point that we're trying to make.
It's very important that that point be made, because the vast majority of people who are now in psychiatric facilities are not dangerous to other people.
But they're being treated...
And yet we set up our legal system in an effort to get the John Gacy's, and we sweep in the Ray Unzingers and the Janet Gotkins, and we sweep in tons of people who don't need to be in order to get that one guy when we could get him through the criminal system. Yeah.
I'd like to ask how you do get out of a mental institution once you're in. What's the process?
With difficulty.
Great difficulty.
Well, at Farview, in one fell swoop, a law group from the University of Pennsylvania, Prison Research Council, got 550 out, similarly to Kenneth, through constitutional means. Went to the Supreme Court and decided that you can't have two hack psychiatrists that are perhaps alcoholics, certainly retired, not accredited, not even psychiatrists, just GPs in a hospital saying, yes, I agree he is insane. And the other man says, yes, I agree too. And so he's held. Every 6 months or every 9 months, they're rolled over. And that's the way they stayed for years and years and years.
If a man, how many times have a man and woman had a fight within a marriage? And oh, wait a minute. We'll stay with me.
I don't have any idea how many times.
Powerful question, isn't it? And the guy decides she's crazy.
Right.
I mean, obviously, she's got to be crazy. She disagrees with me.
That's right.
All right? So can I throw her in that, I mean, how simple is it?
In some states, you can. You can just go to court and go to night court.
You don't even have to go to court.
Well, in New York,
just bring them down to a hospital.
Don't I need another signature?
In New York, if you claim that your wife is dangerous, in New York, one psychiatrist can commit her. Just sign a piece of paper and away she goes.
Okay.
Well, we'll be back in just a moment. No, we're
The basic things we used to know, was it so long ago? Where did those basic values go?
At Purity, we've started our Food for Fitness program to help you eat better for better health. Look for these tags for foods which are calorie controlled. Fat modified, contain no added sugar, no added sodium. And these free booklets tell you more. Good health, an important basic value. At Purity, your basic value store.
I'd like more fashions to choose from.
More name brands.
More quality.
More value. You know what you ought to get?
What?
You ought to get to Zayre, because you ought to get it all.
Get it all, get it all, get to Zayre and get it all.
At Zayre, your dollar still gets you something you can believe in. Rack after rack of the latest fashions, names you can trust, quality you can count on, prices you can live with.
Get it all, get to Zayre and get it all.
Introducing a most extraordinary spaghetti. New high-protein Prince Superoni spaghetti. Ounce for ounce, Prince Superoni in dry weight has more protein and less fat than hamburger, chicken, cottage cheese, or steak. With it, you can substantially cut your meat bill without sacrificing nutrition. For high protein efficiency and economy, try Prince Superoni. It has 41% more protein than hamburger. Prince Superoni spaghetti, a superior alternative with superior economy.
The Urban League's third annual dinner dance will blast off April 17th with guest speaker Dr. Ronald McNair, astronaut candidate for NASA. He'll address the issue of black youth in the space race and the need for increased awareness in the fields of engineering and the sciences. For ticket information, call 266-3550.
Overweight women
women should do themselves a favor and call
Weight loss clinic should get some kind of an award.
People are raving about Weight Loss Clinic.
the results.
We have a proven program with results that could amaze you. Call
I
us.
hadn't waited so long.
It's the first program that's worked for me.
Weight Loss Clinic.
The nurses really care.
Weight Loss Clinic.
My weight is where it should be.
Weight Loss Clinic, because it works.
Call this number or check information for the clinic nearest you.
Fabulous.
That's a photo from Farview State Hospital with the hospital underlined. Is that what you'd guess that is? You wanted to make what point, Dr.
Yes,
Stone?
I think that you're getting the wrong impression, and your audience is getting the wrong impression at this point, that it is so easy to get into a mental hospital and to be locked up there forever. For example, in my state now, the problem that most families... Massachusetts, and in many states, in Illinois now, the problem that many people face is that they have some member of the family who's seriously mentally ill, and they can't get them into a hospital. They can't get a psychiatrist to help. They can't get anyone in the community to help. In our state, most of the community mental health centers don't even have any beds available.
I protest, excuse me, I am in contact all the time with hundreds of patients all across the country through the organized ex-patients movement. I've heard that position from psychiatrists, and I have never, ever heard of anyone having any trouble getting into a community mental health center or a hospital. They have an awful lot of trouble getting off their drugs and getting out of the hospital. I have never, ever heard a psychiatric inmate complain that they could not get into a hospital. That is a point of view held by psychiatrists.
Yeah. Yes, I am from Massachusetts, and I'll have to agree with Dr. Stone. I had a niece who had a very bad problem for many years, and we could not get her into a hospital. You know, we went to psychiatrists and stuff. They let her in for, all she had to stay in was 5 days, and then she could sign herself out. And she did. And she still has a problem.
And that is much more the truth of the matter than what Mrs. Gotkin is saying.
Yes, ma'am. You'll stand, please.
Yes. I'd like to ask the people over there who are talking about some of the things you went through, what would you suggest to people who have someone in the family that they love that's suicidal or has a nervous breakdown? What should we, what would you do with them then? Would you suggest bringing them to a psychiatrist?
I wouldn't. It's a very hard problem because you're talking about people you love who are in emotional pain, and you want to do the best thing you possibly can for them. But you have to bear in mind that putting them in an institution that strips them of their dignity and their credibility and their liberty and their money and drugs them against their will is not what you would want to do to someone in the best of health. So it's hardly something you want to do to someone who's suffering. I think one of the things is that people tend not to listen to people who are in emotional pain. They tend to discount them and think that because their behavior is a little bit odd, because they want to commit suicide, that somehow this makes them less of a person. It makes them somebody you shouldn't listen to.
Even newspaper reporters.
I'd like to nobody asked them, what would you like to do? Where would you like to go?
Our original
I would
source
say steer away from mental hospitals.
Mr. Rawls.
Our initial source in the Farview stories and series was a man who had been to 9 other newspapers before he came to the Philadelphia Inquirer. And none of them, as soon as they found out he had been in an institution for the criminally insane,
here's another wacko.
Discounted him and said, oh my God, we can't listen to this. Here's another crazy. Why didn't somebody at the front door stop him before he got up here?
There's a paternalism about
absolutely.
there, yes, we know. And there's a pat on the head and you're sent off.
Absolutely. And you're nuts. I mean, who's going to believe a nut?
Yeah. Yes, I have a daughter. She's 22 right now, and I had difficulty with her when she was in her teens. I did try to get her some help. I'm much interested in her, and I've had quite a bit of difficulty in getting her into the institution, which she is in Manteno right now. I go there to try to visit every week to show that I've got interest in her. It's awful hard putting them in there, but I have her there now. And maybe I'm impatient because I'd like to have a lot of help because I can't do it myself. I'm the only one to do anything.
The truth of the matter is you're almost in the minority. I mean, it's good that you care and that you visit, because what happens in the worst of institutions is that once the families are often embarrassed by the fact that they have someone who is mentally ill or different, and so they don't visit. They want anybody to know that they're there. And when they quit visiting, then the staff quits listening and quits caring so much. But if someone comes every day or every week and comes regularly, the staff knows they're going to be held accountable. I think that is
Well,
very important.
I'm not only interested in my daughter, but I see a lot of them on the floor, these other people, you know, these youngsters. And I feel sorry for them, and they're beginning to even call me their second mother and all that.
Because they aren't having visitors.
That's correct.
How far is Mantina?
Well, I live on the south side. I live in Evergreen Park, and I've timed it, and it was about 38 miles from my driveway to the front of the Mantino.
Mantino, by the way, is in the middle of a cornfield. I mean, it's just
Very much
by
so, yes.
itself.
And in what way was your daughter difficult?
Well, she had suicidal attempts, and she had also bodily attacked me because I would not agree with her. And I just couldn't take it.
You're a single parent?
Yes, I am. I'm all by myself, and I work quite a bit. 6 days a week, sometimes 10 hours a day, which doesn't give me much time to cope with a big problem like that.
So you're saying that the institution, however unfortunate, is the only remedy you have right now?
That's correct.
Well, I think it's important that we not forget that mental illness is really like physical illness. I mean, you know,
it's here.
It's here, and it needs treatment.
Well,
Our argument
many of us
is
don't agree with you
that
on
in the
that.
institutions don't provide the treatment. Some institutions don't, but you know, wouldn't you agree that that's the reason you have psychiatrists? It's the same reason you have an internist. If you're ill, you need help.
Ms. Gotkin wanted to make what point?
A lot of us don't agree that mental illness is like physical illness. We don't think there is such a thing as mental illness.
Do we just
I'd like to
different, you
speak
mean?
for a moment to the woman who asked what to do about the suicidal friend. There are very few alternatives to the system in the whole country right now. And one of the things we can all do is to make demands on the psychiatric system that it be accountable for what it does. Find out about those drugs. Find out what's going on inside those hospitals. Lobby for the laws to be changed so that people can't be locked up against their will, so that people can go voluntarily and really get help, which they can't do for the most part.
But Ms. Gotkin, your statement is well received, and it's clear that that it has to be considered, but it doesn't speak to this woman's problem.
At the very moment, it doesn't. And that hospital is probably not offering the best that it could because it's part of a system that was not designed to help people. It was designed to restrain people. And once that system becomes a voluntary system, then people will be able to demand what they really need.
We're stuffing the hospitals with people who should not be there. If those people were not forced in against their wills, then the hospitals could take care of the people like this lady's daughter.
Well, I have the understanding that my daughter was signed into the hospital, and anytime she wants to, she can sign herself out.
All right, but you say she needs to be there and there's no other place for her. The hospital should be for people like that.
Does she want to
That's
be
the
there?
correct way to use it.
At
Well, we're
first she
stuffing
did,
the
and in
hospital-
fact, when she would come home, I had her home on a couple of visits, and she says, well, I'm not crazy. I says, it isn't that you're crazy. I says, you need help. And the thing of it is when they're in that kind of a condition, a lot of people don't realize that they do need help.
We were in that condition, and we were told we needed help, and what we got was called help, and it was very far from help.
It's also, people should also understand that just because you signed yourself into a mental hospital doesn't mean you can sign yourself out. They always tell you that, or they frequently tell you can sign yourself out.
Well,
People who sign themselves in-
she walked off from there, and they didn't even bother trying to get her back.
Well, but if they'd wanted to keep her, believe me, they would have.
That's right.
If you sign yourself in, you will not be able to sign yourself out in virtually every state, unless the psychiatrists say it's okay.
All right, and we'll be back in just a moment. Thank you very much.
The #1 favorite vegetable soup, Campbell's. Tastes so good, you've never seen 15 different vegetables disappear so fast.
I'm small, but I get this big house outdoor fresh and clean because I am armed with Ajax. I've a feeling of cleaning power. Armed with Ajax. Pine Forest Ajax with an air freshener built in. Cuts through the greasiest dirt and grime. Leaves every room smelling as clean and fresh as it looks. Get that feeling of cleaning power. Get Pine Forest Ajax.
If it's really Cartier, it says Cartier. If it's really Wedgwood, it says Wedgwood. If it's really a Levalor blind and not an imitation, it says Levalor.
Lift a Levalor. Lift a Levalor. Lift a Levalor.
level or blind, and what do you find? You find the Levelor name.
If it's a level or blind and not an imitation, it says Levelor.
Boston has a playground rivaled by few cities in the world. A place for quiet gliding beneath a distant skyline. A place to make new friends, to learn new skills, to open a new side of yourself. With over 100 boats and instructions for any level of sailor, community boating is there for all. Unlimited sailing and instruction for a low fee. Anyone and everyone can ride the wind. Call 523-1038.
Come help the legion of people who help Easter seals help the handicapped.
Thank you, Mr. Lacey.
Thank you, Blake.
Thank you, Mrs. Lewis. Thank you, Blake.
Come, be a miracle worker. Give to Easter seals.
I've got one here for you.
Take your last look at good old Fresca. Because now there's a new Fresca with a fresh new taste. A fresh new taste that comes from a delicious blend of citrus flavors. New Fresca is still sugar-free, still low-calorie, with a unique new taste you'll enjoy again and again. Take your first look at new sparkling clear Fresca. Now, try the fresh new taste.
That's just one of the scenes from Farview, which Wendell Rawls, the reporter, had taken by a photographer. Okay, we're talking about warehousing people and how we accommodate the mentally ill, and steps forward now. Carol Marine, a reporter here in Chicago for NBC News, who has just recently done a series on the issue of the criminally insane and who gets in and out and under what circumstances. This piece that you're about to share with us from your report here in Chicago asks what question, or presents what dilemma?
It presents the dilemma of whether you keep someone in or out and on what terms. And as you said, I'm dealing with the criminally insane here. What you'll see is a young man who killed his mother. The question is, was he insane or was he sane?
Yeah, I don't know if this is... Why did he do that? He beat her with barbells, didn't he?
Yes.
Why did he do that?
Well, there are differing
What's the matter? You're already angry, aren't you?
Oh, I saw it.
Yeah. You saw the piece?
Yes.
But what's interesting is your reaction. We are, all of us, appalled by this. We are, and we're entitled to be appalled. It's human. It's not nice what we're hearing. But what does this do to our attitudes toward what should be done with these people? All right, I'm getting muddy
Well,
here.
you'll see those attitudes in the piece, because you have a father who is both his son's victim and his son's father.
Why did he kill her? Why did he do that? What provoked him?
He said that he saw in her, and you'll see him say this, he thought he saw the devil coming at him with an ice pick.
Was there a previous...
He was taking angel dust, marijuana, and alcohol. He had had some previous mental health history.
Roll tape with courtesy to NBC News for their permission to use it. Here's Carol Marine's report.
I took, an overdose of angel dust. And then from what the police, and everybody told me when I got, finally come around to it after being temporarily insane on the angel dust, they said, I killed my mom. They said, I beat her with a set of weights.
The story of 22-year-old Ed Nitz is the story of a brutal murder. In September of 1978, while high on drugs and alcohol, he bludgeoned his mother to death with his barbells. It was a crime that horrified the small downstate town of Cottage Hills.
It was just 2.5 months ago that Ed Nitz came to trial here at the Madison County Courthouse. It took the court only an hour to find him not guilty by reason of insanity, but that ruling was made over the objections of the prosecution.
I think he knew exactly what he was doing. I was arguing for a conviction for the offense of murder, that he was not insane at the time of the offense, but that he was able to control himself and was able to conform to the legal requirements of the law.
Before and since his trial, Ed Nitz has been committed to the downstate Chester Mental Health Center, a maximum security state institution. Here he has received therapy. Here he has made real progress, according to his psychologist.
Oh, you imagined that your mother was the devil? What was that?
I guess that was hallucinations caused by the drugs I took. Because I could see her face, devil, real ugly, and that she was coming at me with an ice pick.
You actually saw her coming at you with an ice pick.
Based on that improvement, Ed Nitz hopes to return home this summer, at least on day-long visit permits.
Ed Nitz's father still lives in this house in Cottage Hills, Illinois, and Mr. Nitz says he wants his son home.
I love my wife and I miss her. And I miss my son.
And you want him home?
Why, sure. If he's ready, come home. But if he's not, that's up to the doctors.
Has it been hard for you these months?
It's been hard for me since my wife was gone, September the 6th. That's when he beat her up. It's been like that every day. I've been crying every day since September. But I can't cry no more because I cry too much already.
Raymond Nitz says he has forgiven his son. It does not appear, though, that the community has. Only a few here at the corner bar would even talk about Ed Nitz, and those who did worried about his return.
I don't think the town would be too enthused about it.
I don't think they'd be too thrilled, let's put it that way.
Why?
Because of what he did. They'd probably be very skeptical that it might happen again.
What other people think, I don't care, because that's not their son. If Eddie was somebody else's son, they'd feel the same way I do.
I know it's, be hard in that because of all the publicity that, brought in that small county. I got to face it in that. I just hope people out there understand what happened to me.
Okay, we don't want to confuse you. It's true, and I think Dr. Stone wants this to... There are a lot of issues in the air here. This does not speak to the alleged mistreatment of patients in mental institutions. Carol Marine's report speaks to the issue of criminality and how insanity impacts on the judicial system in that area, and how
the thing it does raise is that we get less protection as a society by putting these people through the mental health system. This guy's going to be out on the street in less than a year.
But see, that presumes that he's guilty and not in need of mental treatment, I think. There is an argument to be made that because he committed a crime, his mental illness, if you believe that he was mentally ill, is irrelevant, and he should go to the prison system. A number of issues are raised by that. One is the humanity and the need of treatment. Get out. Also, you're going to get those people back. The question is, in what condition?
Yeah.
So there's a bleed over to the treatment of other mental patients who are not considered criminals.
With some of the most vicious criminals in the state of Florida, people who rape their grandmothers, who rape little children, the most violent, atrocious crimes you can think of. Nearly every one of those people knew what they were doing. You can't live shoulder to shoulder with a person day after day without knowing if he's nuts or not. Well, they weren't nuts. They were just mean, vicious people.
You got to be nuts to rape your grandmother.
No.
You got to be crazy.
Vicious people. These things were done in cold